Chapter 343. It was a camphor tree. Its trunk was as thick as a person's arms and it was more than 10 meters tall. Dozens of meters away and in the midst of the flames, Sun Xiaoping could only vaguely see its slightly thicker branches. But even so, when he was in a daze, he still counted the branches of the tree over and over again. There were 9 thick branches. On top of the 9 thick branches, there were 23 thinner branches. These branches had leaves on top. Some leaves were like steamed buns, some like gourds. There were also some like Miss Wuxia's face and waist. This big camphor tree had been burning for 6 hours, almost a whole night. Sun Xiaoping knew wood and knew that camphor trees were oily, so they burned faster. But the problem was, his companions noticed his actions. They were stunned for a moment, then stood up nervously, thinking that he had discovered the fire. Xiaoping, what's wrong? Sun Xiaoping frowned and thought for a while. Without turning his head, he pointed at the camphor tree. Look at that camphor tree. His companions immediately looked there. But they only saw the tree in the fire. The trunk and branches were already black. There was nothing unusual. So they asked him again, what's wrong with the camphor tree? Sun Xiaoping was silent for a while, then his voice trembled. 6 hours ago I saw, it had 9 big branches, 23 small branches, and those leaves. Now take a look. A few of his companions heard his words and looked at the tree again, still confused. But there were already 2 smart people. After looking at the camphor tree again, their eyes widened. Sun Xiaoping took a deep breath. Although the air was so hot that it was hard to breathe, his voice was cold. It's been burning for 6 hours, the leaves are still there. This fire, how long will it burn? Everyone was stunned. The outside seemed to be in chaos. Even in the backyard of the Yu family, Wuxia and Lily could still hear the sorrowful, frightened and fearful voices of the people of Xianxia town. The voices even covered the sound of the wind so they could slightly hear what the group of people were saying. Some people came to the Yu family's mansion to question Yu Zhengfeng. Yu Zhengfeng was the master of Xianxia town's Yu clan, a gentry. He was in charge of the town's timber trade and the monetary regulations. Although this town also had a captain, Yu Zhengfeng was the one who had the final say. He was the one overseeing and coordinating the defense of Xianxia town. However, he didn't expect things to turn out this way. It's been 6 hours. The leaves haven't even burned out, young master. Lily came back from the front after asking around. She didn't seem to know what to say. She stood at the door and held onto the door frame, watching Wuxia undressing Yu Meng and untying his hair. Young master, isn't this a barbecue? If this fire kept burning for a few days, a dozen days, and the temperature kept getting higher and higher, the people in the town would become roasted meat on a stone slab. They would be cooked slowly. There's no way to escape. Wuxia untied Yu Meng's hair and combed it with a wooden comb. After Lily finished speaking in one breath, she turned her head and asked, what about following the river? Isn't there a boat? I also went to the river just now. Lily closed the door and walked to the table, picking up the teapot. The air was getting drier and drier. It was autumn now, but it was as hot as the dog days. I don't know what's so strange. The river wasn't on fire, but it's hotter than the town. Guess what? The fish floated up, it's cooked. How can we take a boat like this? Their small dinghy isn't like our family's ship. If we take them to the river, they'll be cooked within a few feet. After saying this, she poured some tea from the teapot to drink. She frowned after taking a sip. A few days ago the tea was too cold at this time. But now the tea was actually warm, as if it had just been boiled. She drank a cup of tea, but the heat was not enough, so she unbuttoned 2 buttons of her clothes and sat down. Wuxia saw her like this, looked at her and then looked at Yu Meng. Yu Meng smiled. It won't be cooked. If this kind of fire and temperature were to continue burning, there would be 3 things that would happen first. First, someone accidentally set the house on fire, or the house itself is roasted. So the town is in a sea of fire. As for the other one, it's to burn out fire poison. You've all heard of it. Someone lit a fire to keep warm in the house in the winter, and the fire poison came out, killing everyone in the house. Although Xianxia town is big, the fire is even bigger. Being surrounded by the fire for a few days, the poison is also very scary. When he said this, he stretched out his arms. So Wuxia helped him change into his pajamas and helped him lie down. Lily was anxious. Young master, what's the third thing? Yu Meng lay down, closed his eyes and thought for a while. The third thing? I guess, it's already happened. Do you know who lived near Changji town in this Hulu mansion who used to live there? Wuxia picked up the fan, used a small handkerchief to wipe the sweat on his forehead, and then gently fanned Yu Meng. How would we know? The Hu road in Hulu mansion should have been pronounced as Hu Er Hun Luan. This is a translation of the vernacular, taking the meaning of Hu people, the same path. It's both a transliteration and a free translation. But Hu Er Hun Luan originally referred to a group of nomads who lived in this generation, meaning people of the forest and black stone. And this Toulon of Toulon River is also Hu Er Hun Luan people. Tron meant black stone. Toulon River is actually Black Stone River. Yu Meng sighed in a low voice. Guess why this river is called Blackstone River and why the water is so hot. Wu Su's hand that was fanning Yu Meng paused for a moment, and then looked at Lily. These two girls had been calm before this. But now there was a hint of fear in their eyes as well. They knew what the black stone was. In the past, when it was autumn and winter, the Yu family transported black stone by cart. The Yu family's big house had an earth dragon coiled under it. Ordinary people used firewood to warm the earth dragon, but the Yu family used black stone. That thing was dug out from the ground. A fingernail-sized piece was equivalent to a good piece of dry firewood. That thing didn't have any smell and it felt very smooth, like colored glass or jade. It was hard to ignite when it encountered an open flame, so it had to be smothered with firewood for half a day before it could be ignited. But once it was ignited, a fingernail-sized piece of black stone could burn for a whole day. And now, this Toulon River was the meaning of Blackstone River. Lily suddenly jumped up as if there was something scary under the ground. Her little face was pale and she pointed at the ground. Young master, you mean under the river? Under the ground it's all black stone. Like gold, silver and copper mines, it's all black stone mines. Young master, how do you know? Yu Meng opened half of his eyes and looked at her. Don't be afraid. It's different from our house. It's true that there's black stone underground, but it's buried deep. It'll be fine after a few days. It's just that the fire on the ground is burning fiercely. Maybe it'll burn all the way to the bottom. If the whole piece of black stone is ignited and smothered under the ground, probably even the Deva can't put it out. He seemed to be slowly getting sleepy and closed his eyes and yawned. Looking at the Toulon River, the black stone underground has already been ignited. You two really can't calm down. Take my talisman and see it tomorrow. He yawned as he spoke, but before he could finish, he fell asleep. Wu Su and Lily stared blankly for a while. Then, like two frightened but agile rabbits, they silently pounced towards the bedside and retrieved Yu Meng's undergarments. They felt around the clothes and found a white silk bag that was sewn on with familiarity. Then they pulled down the white silk bag and opened it. Inside was a purple talisman written with gold powder. Only then did the two girls feel slightly relieved. Wu Su and Lily kept the talismans properly before quietly extinguishing the lights and closing the door behind them. Hot wind blew over, along with the cries of the people in the front yard. It seemed that Yu Zhengfang didn't manage to appease them, and now they were making more and more noise. Indeed, they realized that the fire could burn for a few days, more than 10 days or even a month, and so many people were trapped here waiting for death. How could they not be anxious? If they knew this, they would have abandoned their homes and fled, and at least they could live a few more days and not be roasted to death, suffocated to death, thirsty to death and burned to death. It was also because of the choice they made in the past that they couldn't afford to regret, that the sadness and fear exploded even more violently. But panic and sadness were what they felt. Wu Su and Lily hugged the purple talisman in their arms, but their minds were much more at ease. This was a talisman that old master left for young master when he was alive. It was said that it was written by a Jinren in Daotong. It could save lives at a critical moment. That day when the Yu family was exterminated, they didn't even use it, so it was obvious how precious it was. Young master also mentioned this talisman. He said that once it was used, it would not be burned by fire or splashed by water. It could even move freely in thunder and fire. But it couldn't save everyone in the town, it could only protect the three of them. But young master has changed into a different person. Why did he insist on coming to Changji town? Why didn't he leave? And he didn't say. Wu Su exhaled softly, took out her little sword from her clothes and held it in her arms. They had experienced the Yu family's extermination, and knew that many people would do many terrible things when the end of the world came. Their young master also changed. He used to be silly, but they all knew that young master wasn't really silly. Later when the Yu family was exterminated, young master didn't pretend to be silly anymore. He took them to the north. They went to Changji town and stayed there, saying that they would wait for his master Lu Gongjiao, and that they had an appointment many years ago. They didn't know what they were waiting for. Their young master became smarter every day and he knew more and more things. In their eyes, this was like a miracle performed by an immortal. They should have been happy, but they always felt that young master was becoming more and more unfamiliar. As if one day he would suddenly leave. Lily also sighed with her sister. Young master, who is he? Halfway through her words, she suddenly let out a low and stern shout. She abruptly turned her head to look at the top of the wall. There was a figure on top of the wall with only half of his head sticking out. He seemed to be frightened by her shout and hurriedly shrunk back. Wuxia and Lily immediately stood up. Wuxia guarded the door while Lily held the unsheathed small sword in her hand and slowly walked down the wall. This wall wasn't the wall of the Yu family in the city of Wei. Along the way they saw that the walls of many small towns weren't as thick and tall as the Yu family's courtyard wall. Therefore that person seemed to climb up easily. He took a breath and poked his head out again. Turned out to be a teenager. Lily paused for a moment when she saw him. Because he looked a little familiar, as if he was a kid in the town. Although this teenager was about the same age as her in her eyes, he was really just like a kid. Big sister, it's bad outside. The teenager leaned on the wall for a long time, his face red to the ears before saying this. Then he raised his hand to wipe his face. It's going to burn. The fire is bad. Do you guys want to escape with me? Lily was stunned and turned to look at Wuxia. The two little sisters looked at each other for a while, and Lily suddenly laughed softly. Sun Xiaoping, who was on top of the wall, saw her laugh. For a moment he felt that the whole world suddenly cooled down. The sound of fire, wind, and people were all gone. Then he saw Lily holding a cute sheathed sword in her hand as she leisurely and elegantly paced back and forth. Her lake green skirt rippled, revealing a pair of moon-white embroidered shoes. Then she turned around, tilted her head and looked at him. Why do you want to save us? How can we escape? Sun Xiaoping felt that his heart was hit by something warm, hot and soft. He was stunned for a full 3 breaths time. That terrible and sweet throbbing gradually subsided, and he became flustered again. He didn't even dare to look directly into Lily's bright and beautiful eyes. He could only avert his gaze and look at her skirt. I'm not. Your girls, and your mates. You must have suffered a lot. There's a boat by the river, you can escape on it. Lily giggled. Then what about my young master? Sun Xiaoping suddenly raised his head and wanted to say, who cares about your domineering, pretty boy young master? But the words were at the tip of his tongue and he hurriedly swallowed them. After a slight hesitation he said, your young master should also take him away. Lily laughed again. She giggled like a silver bell as she turned around and walked to the front of the house. All right, little brother, we won't escape. You better pray for your own good luck. Sun Xiaoping's heart suddenly sank to the bottom of his stomach. It sank so much that his chest hurt as if breathing would hurt. He looked at Lily's back in disappointment and finally shouted again, people will really die. But Lily no longer cared about him. She once again sat on the stone steps by the door, hugging the small sword and leaning against her sister. Sun Xiaoping clenched his teeth and suddenly wanted to jump into the courtyard. But at this moment he suddenly heard a high-pitched sharp cry. That was a woman's voice, piercing the night sky, the sound of the wind and the sound of the fire, striking the tip of Sun Xiaoping's heart. He was slightly stunned for a moment before he realized what the cry was about. It's on fire. The first house in Changji town burned. But it wasn't the house near the fire that people were worried about, but a wooden house in the middle of town. Before this, the desperate people gathered at the Yu family's house to vent their emotions. Plus, the sky was bright red and there was hot wind whistling between the houses on the street, so they didn't notice that the ground was smoking. Green smoke came out of the cracks in the stone road, and was soon dispersed by the wind. At this moment, a house that was already extremely dry from the wind finally caught fire. Yu Meng's prediction came true. The earth fire was ignited by the mountain fire. It was followed by the neighboring second and third houses. Once their terrifying worries became reality, the crazy and desperate people actually calmed down. If they ignored it, they would die soon. If they went to put out the fire, perhaps they could live a little longer. So they quickly swarmed out of the Yu family's house as if they were grasping for a chance of survival, and went to put out the 3 burning houses. But the misfortune didn't stop there. Before the fire in the 3 wooden houses was brought under control, another 2 large houses on the west side of town caught fire. Outside the town there was a sea of fire. At this moment the town was also about to become a sea of fire. Wuxia and Lily saw the fire in the town, and immediately stood up to go into the house and wake Yu Meng up. They helped him get dressed, walked out of the house and flew to the top of the Yu family's wall to take a look. This Xianxia town was already half in flames. The light of the fire illuminated their faces with a red glow. So from afar they saw someone running towards the Toulon River, head first into it, wanting to swim away. But then there was a terrible scream. The river water hidden in the white fog was already boiling, and in an instant people would be blinded, dizzy and then scalded to death. Seeing such a scene, more than 10 people who were planning to board a boat and go along the river stopped in their tracks, and started wailing like stray dogs. Lily looked carefully, but she didn't see the youth. Someone else was still putting out the fire. But it wasn't because they wanted to survive, but because they didn't know what to do in the face of death. So this was the only thing they could do. The fire spread quickly and some people were engulfed in flames, while others ran around on the streets with their bodies on fire. 8 hours ago this Xianxia town seemed to be working together to tide over the crisis. But now, it was actually like a fiery hell. Finally, the surviving 50 to 60 people crowded to the Yu family's wall. They seemed to see the 3 people standing on the wall and for some reason they ran over. But there was nothing they could do. The fire on both sides burned more and more fiercely. These people shrank under the wall in despair, and burst into earth-shattering cries. Wuxia and Lily looked at the people under the wall and hearing the cries they couldn't bear to look away. Lily saw that the youth was among them. He also seemed to want to cry, but he raised his head and stared at Lily, his cheeks tightly clenched, and his hand tightly grasped an empty wooden bucket. Yu Meng sighed, "Use that talisman." The 3 of them could only watch as the dozens of people on the wall were burned alive and there was nothing they could do. So Wuxia put her hand into her bosom and she felt the purple talisman. But at this moment, they as well as the people who were crying under the wall, suddenly heard the clanking sound of iron chains hitting each other. Cries, wind, fire and the sound of houses collapsing. Among these loud sounds the iron chains hitting each other sound shouldn't have been heard. But strangely at this moment that weak but clear sound actually made its way into everyone's ears. It sounded as if there was a pair of invisible hands forcefully choking everyone's throat. The dying Xianxia town residents all stopped crying, and stared at the bluestone road in the distance that was already engulfed in flames. Then they saw something even more terrifying than death. That was, the Yin soldiers are borrowing the road. An old man whose hair and beard were already charred said with great fear as if he was moaning. In the face of death, the fear of being burned to death by the flames, they were in despair, howling and venting. But at this moment, in the face of another thing, another terrifying power that they absolutely could not understand which brought about a great fear, even their wailing and despairing thoughts were frozen. There were terrifying ghosts, walking along the bluestone road that had already been burned red, coming out from the raging flames. There were terrifying heads. There were all kinds of heads. Human heads, dog heads, tiger heads, deer heads, bear heads. These were the heads of wild beasts that the residents of Xianxia town had either seen or never seen, floated in the air staring blankly at them with their lifeless eyes, maintaining the hideous and terrifying appearance they had before their deaths as they walked over. These were ghosts. Their heads still looked the same but their bodies were so faint that they could not be seen clearly. Long misty green iron chains locked their necks, stringing them together. Their steps were also synchronized. In this kind of night, it was a kind of terrifying uniformity that sent chills down one's spine. With every step he took, the iron chains clanked. With every clank of the iron chains, the flames that they passed through suddenly dimmed, turning into green will-o'-the-wisps. Wherever they passed, sound and light were all absorbed. On the road were the corpses of the townspeople who had just been burned to death. As the procession of ghosts passed by, the hideous and terrifying ghosts of the townspeople stood up straight. Then they were locked by the protruding iron chains, and pulled into the procession. The feeling of suffocation brought about by fear gripped everyone, including Wuxia and Lily. They widened their eyes, held their breaths, and subconsciously wanted to hide behind Yu Meng's back. However, as soon as they had this thought, they realized that they did not even have the strength to move their feet. Then, these people who were facing death saw a man in white walking out of the flames. In his hand was the iron chains that locked hundreds and thousands of dead souls. He was like a shepherd strolling in the red or green wilderness, walking slowly without any expression of pity, harvesting all the dead souls along the way. Seeing him, the old man in the crowd widened his eyes again. Using his throat that was choked by despair and fear, he squeezed out a few hoarse words. "It's by Yanjun. Master, we are already dead." However, after this sentence, the man in white stopped in his tracks. So the terrifying ghosts also stopped in their tracks. The people of Changji town saw Bai Yanjun's face clearly. They never thought that Bai Yanjun would look like this. But that Yama King, the originally expressionless Yama King, after glancing at the top of the wall on their side, suddenly smiled. "Yama King? I'm not Yama King. I am Wei River Dragon King. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Note 1. Earth Dragon, an ancient way to keep warm. Leave a fire underground and the fire has an opening on the ground. Start a fire outside and the heat will enter the house through the fire. This is called Earth Dragon. The principle is the same as Fire Kong." Chapter 344. After saying that, he paused. "Young Master Yu, why are you here?" Exhaustion, heat, fear, and shock had caused those who were still alive to lose their ability to think. So when Li Yunxin looked at the top of the wall, they also looked at the top of the wall. They didn't know what Wei River Dragon King meant, but at least they knew that this white-clothed, terrifyingly handsome man was either an immortal who saved people from suffering, or a monster who killed people. And now, someone among them had a relationship with this man. A young Master Yu, who lived in the town for more than 10 days, they didn't know much about him. But how could such a young master who didn't even bother to pour himself water be related to this devil? Under the desperate and frightened gazes of so many people, Yu Meng was stunned. He stared at Li Yunxin carefully for a while and opened his mouth. "Li Yunxin." Li Yunxin slightly tilted his head to show his affirmation. Yu Meng frowned and didn't know what to say. Of course he had seen Li Yunxin before. He was saved by the demon general under Li Yunxin's command, brought to the Lord Dongting mountain, saw the magnificent palace on the mountain, and saw all kinds of immortal tricks. But at that time he was carrying a blood feud, so he didn't have time to care about other things. All kinds of wonderful tricks were like smoke to him, and it was hard for them to enter his heart. And at that time, Li Yunxin had just entered the true state. Yu Meng didn't know how he killed Yunzi, nor did he know what he did in the Pitfall Mountain and Rong City. To this young master of the Yu family who was in dire straits, he knew that Li Yunxin was a cultivator and a fiendish demon. But as a cultivator and a demon, what kind of abilities did he have? These things were indeed unimaginable to ordinary people. But tonight he saw Li Yunxin walk out of the despairing fire, and he saw Li Yunxin enslave and lead the souls of the dead. These two scenes alone, two scenes connected with the great terror of life and death, finally shook him to the core. He blinked his eyes several times before taking a deep breath. I'm here to take care of something." When he left Dongting, he said that he had to think about whether to follow the Wei River Dragon King or not. Now that he met Li Yunxin again in such a situation, Yu Meng was not sure what he would do. He felt that this terrible flame might have been caused by Li Yunxin. This guy had always been crazy. But if he could create such a terrible fire and burn so many creatures, such a cruel person, he couldn't imagine what such a cruel person would do. It seemed that he could no longer be judged by common sense. Li Yunxin listened to his words, nodded slightly and pondered for a while. While he was deep in thought, the flames finally enveloped the entire Changji town, except for the area around him. When the fire came near him, it suddenly weakened. It first turned light yellow, then turned dark green. Then it turned from blazing hot to gloomy cold. Because of this, these survivors were able to rely on the wall and were protected by Li Yunxin's careless protection. After 6 breaths, Li Yunxin looked at Yu Meng again. "So, have you done it?" "Not yet." "How long will it take?" His tone sounded like they met on the side of the road tonight. The sky was clear, so they chatted for a while. This made Yu Meng very nervous. A few days at least, dozens of days at most. I'm not sure yet. Yu Meng tried to calm down. This fire. Did you make it? Li Yunxin shook his head. Do it as soon as possible. Do it quickly so that you can help me. Then he smiled again. This fire? It has something to do with me, but it also has something to do with the Daotong Kenzo. Speaking of the Daotong Kenzo, have any of you seen their people nearby recently? The second half of the question was directed at the townspeople who were huddled under the wall. But who dared to answer him? Moreover, they really did not know what he was talking about. But it seemed like he did not really want them to answer. Li Yunxin took 2 steps forward. The iron chain in his hand rattled. Those scary ghosts were also pulled closer by him. Then he bent down and looked at those people. No one dared to speak. Even the children did not dare to cry. The scary aura took away their courage and consciousness. They stared at him with wide eyes, teeth chattering. Li Yunxin stretched out his hand and used a finger to touch an old man's forehead, then retracted it. Then a faint, smoke-like soul was pulled out by him. Then Li Yunxin took out a blue book out of nowhere and opened it. It seemed that this book contained all the old man's memories. After a few glances, he frowned slightly. The iron chain in his hand shook. The old man's soul was locked in that scary group. The old man's body tilted and he fell. The townspeople stirred slightly and huddled closer to each other like a group of frightened rabbits. Lily let out a soft, "Ah." Li Yunxin stretched out his hand to touch the second person's forehead. But no one dared to resist. In the face of such a powerful and unfamiliar force that was beyond their understanding, all courage disappeared. They were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. It wasn't until Li Yunxin touched the forehead of the 6th person, the youth named Sun Xiaoping, that Lily couldn't help but cry out. "What are you doing?" Her voice was very soft and sounded timid. But at this time she was indeed the only one who had the courage to ask Li Yunxin this question. Li Yunxin glanced at her but then stretched out his hand. "You want to kill all of them?" Lily shouted again. "What's the difference between you and those Daoists in the city of Wei?" Wuxia pulled Lily's sleeve, but at the same time she held her little sword tightly and stared at Li Yunxin with vigilance. Li Yunxin turned to look at Yu Meng. Yu Meng hesitated for a while, but in the end he did not scold Lily. He frowned. "It's not easy for them to survive. Why does Dragon King have to kill them all? They are just ordinary people." "Who is Dragon King trying to ask?" Li Yunxin straightened up and let go of the teenager in front of him. "Do you want to know what happened? Like this fire?" Yu Meng could not keep up with Li Yunxin's jumping thoughts. Or it could be said that the stronger party always had the power to do whatever they wanted. So he could only frown again and follow the other's train of thought. "What is it? Daotong and Kenzo are chasing after me. I almost succeeded. But now I am preparing to leave a way out for myself. As for this fire, I didn't make it. It was accidentally ignited when I was fighting with Daotong. I can't put it out until now." Li Yunxin looked around again. "I need to borrow this place later. I never thought there would be a town here. But it doesn't matter. So I need to know if there are any Daotong or Kenzo spies nearby. You 3 are acquaintances. Why don't I ask them instead of you?" Yu Meng did not answer him immediately. But Lily frowned again. "Why kill people?" Li Yunxin's face suddenly showed a strange and complicated expression. He stared straight at Yu Meng for a while, then suddenly said, "Young master, you really can't tell?" Yu Meng was even more puzzled. "Tell what?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then suddenly reached out and lifted the body of the old man who died in the beginning. His hand was on the old man's neck, so it was effortless for him to lift the old man up. Then, like shaking a sack, he shook the old man's body. There was a crashing sound. White bones, and dust fell to the ground. Yu Meng, Wuxia and Lily were stunned. They stared at the pile of white bones for a long time, speechless. A body that was full of flesh and blood just a breath ago turned into bones in such a short time? And if they looked carefully, they would find that the white bones were not white but yellow. There were even some cracks on the bones. The cracks were not caused by a punch, but more likely due to a long period of drying and cracking. Li Yunxin reached out and lifted a few other bodies. They all shook in the same way. They all turned into a pile of bones and fell to the ground. Then Li Yunxin reached out and lifted Sun Xiaoping up. This young man was not dead yet, and now that he was on the brink of death, he somehow mustered some courage and tried to kick the scary demon in front of him. But Li Yunxin dipped his left index finger into his mouth, dipped it in some saliva and touched the young man's forehead. And so, this young man who was angry and hopeless and kicking non-stop in the blink of an eye became a pile of bones. The scary thing was that the bones were still moving. It stared with its empty eye sockets and its teeth chattered, making a sound that sounded like a human's voice. Wuxia and Lily finally cried out again and hid half their bodies behind their young master's back. Li Yunxin took out Sun Xiaoping's soul. The bones stopped moving and fell to the ground. Then he slightly raised his head and looked at Yu Meng. Do you know that you have been living in the same ghost town? The three of them were stunned and felt a chill crawling up their spines. It was as if the surroundings were not burning with fire but ice and snow. Looks like you don't know. Li Yunxin turned back and continued to take out the souls from the townspeople, looked at them and moved on to the next one. But this time he was minding his own business while talking. On my way here I met some people who lived in the wild forest. Some of them told me that the north was haunted. They said that those ghosts rushed into the wild forest to kill. Anyone who came near Xianxia town was killed. This ghost has been haunting for hundreds of years. This Xianxia town. There was indeed a Xianxia town, but that was during the Yi dynasty. At the end of the Yi dynasty, Xianxia town was destroyed by war, and no one lived in this area, so it started to be haunted. These ghost things. I looked at them and remembered, they were all people from Xianxia town. But after they died, their souls were extracted, kept and sealed in their corpses to become puppets. They didn't even know they were dead and slowly rotted and dried up. They continued to cut trees, kill people, eat and place logs. Anyone who came up from the river to watch was also killed. But luckily there are not many people here. The person who sealed them here told them to guard something. He also told them to wait for a person. But Li Yunxin looked at the blue book in his hand and laughed. No wonder these ghost things didn't run when they saw the fire and insisted on guarding this town. So I have to take a good look and see if it's the work of Dao Tong or Kenzo people. Such a great ability. To be able to leave so many ghosts in the world of the living, it's really like a human. After saying this, he reached out his hand and crushed the neck of the last corpse. So the bones in front of him were already piled up to his knees. Found it. But recently there was one called Lu Gongjiao. He came here half a month ago. But he was surrounded and killed by these ghost things. He turned to look at Yu Meng. Lu Gongjiao, isn't this young master Yu's teacher? But it's reasonable. Martial arts masters were dealing with people, not dead ghosts. And there were so many dead ghosts at that. If young master Yu wants to wait here, then your teacher will have waited in vain. Yu Meng's eyes widened. Dead? My teacher is dead. But Li Yunxin didn't care about his surprise. He turned around and stood up straight, looking at Yu Meng seriously. This group of dead ghosts kill anyone they see. But the three of you came here safe and sound. In other people's eyes, these dead ghosts all look like dried up bones, but you can't see it. So young master Yu, who are you? Yu Meng was stunned. Wuxia and Lily also opened their small mouths, looking at their young master in surprise. After a while Yu Meng opened his mouth. How would I know? I heard someone talking to me. Who? Li Yunxin immediately asked. I don't know, it's just in my head. Yu Meng frowned and hit his head. Because of this he accidentally fell off the wall. Wuxia and Lily screamed and hurriedly jumped down to help him. But the two girls reacted a little slower because of their shock. Yu Meng tumbled and fell into the pile of bones in front of Li Yunxin, stirring up a cloud of smoke. The two girls frowned, gritted their teeth and came over to help him up. That Yu Meng hit his head again, unaware. It told me something. It seems like I remembered it myself. And told me to come to Xianxia town to find me. Although he didn't look like he was in pain, he was thinking very hard. Li Yunxin looked at him carefully and felt that he wasn't faking it. So he took a deep breath and used his sword fingers to wipe his eyes. His black and white human eyes instantly turned into the golden eyes of dragons. Then he scanned the ground in all directions. When I came here I felt that there was something wrong with the earth chi here. As he looked he walked slowly. The iron chain in his hand rattled and everywhere it went, the flames were quickly extinguished. So there's an array hidden underground. Good heavens. but his sigh was like winking at a blind man. If Lu Laodao was here, he would know that Li Yunxin had always been good at setting up arrays. Not only was he good at it, but he also set up unimaginably large arrays. And this array actually made him sigh, good heavens. What kind of amazing array was this? Chapter 345. Li Yunxin sighed. With a flip of his hand he took out a pen and paper. But this paper was not an ordinary paper. It was a magic paper used to write talismans. It was only the size of a palm, but it could be extended to a very large area with divine sense. This item was either for the new disciples or for the Almighty with extremely high cultivation. The new disciples couldn't control their own spiritual aura on the talisman paper, so they needed this thing. It was like a child learning to write big characters for the first time, so the junior disciples made the talismans bigger. But in this kind of magic paper that could be extended by divine sense, when the divine sense withdrew, it would still be the size of a palm, so it could be used. This thing in Li Yunxin's eyes was like a picture of his previous world. It was the same principle, enlarging it and writing on it and then retracting it. When almighty beings with extremely high cultivation bases used this magic paper, they would need to construct an intricate and complicated formation. This kind of formation might be layered on top of each other. Every stroke in turn would contain one or two small formations. Without this magic paper it was almost impossible to make it. But the cultivators in the middle were already skilled enough to make a Dao field in a snail's shell. But they didn't have a better skill to make an extremely complicated formation, so they couldn't use it. Now that Li Yunxin took out this thing that he plundered from Qing Kongzi, it was naturally for a powerful cultivator to use, for the first time in his life. Compared to this kind of delicate and complicated formation, he seemed to be better at and preferred the bold and unconstrained formation, such as using mountains and rivers as a formation. But tonight the thing under Changji town wasn't something he was very good at, so he decided to give it a try. When he spread the magic paper in the air and picked up the brush, Yu Meng held his head and asked, "What are you doing?" Li Yunxin picked up the brush. The pale golden magic paper in front of him suddenly became infinitely large in front of his eyes. It was almost able to cover the entire Changji town. But this feeling was only his own feeling. He turned to look at Yu Meng and saw that he was still an ordinary person. This kind of experience was hard for mortals to imagine. So he put down the first stroke. First he used cinnabar to draw the first layer on the paper. There were many red dots on the magic paper like red stars in the sky. Li Yunxin put down the brush so fast that his arm turned into a blur. In just 2 breaths of time, this palm-sized piece of magic paper was already filled with densely packed red dots. From Wu Su and Lily's point of view, this piece of paper was already red. But this was only the first layer. Li Yunxin was trying to simulate and restore the original structure of the huge formation under Changji town. Then he put down the brush and let out a long breath. The scorching airflow turned into an arrow-like white mist in the air. When I was in the city of Wei, I heard that when young Master Yu was born, there was a strange phenomenon. It was as if he had been possessed by a deity, and he helped your father take control of the unstable Yu family, ultimately becoming a superpower in the kingdom of Qing. I also heard that after young Master Yu grew up, he was struck by lightning one day. Then he turned his head and started drawing the structure of the second layer of the formation. I also heard that after young Master Yu grew up a little, he was struck by lightning one day. Lily didn't even think and stood in front of Yu Meng. I also heard that after young Master Yu grew up, he was struck by lightning one day. Lily didn't even think about it and stood in front of Yu Meng. That's just a bunch of servants gossiping. Lily didn't even think and stood in front of Yu Meng. This is just the gossip of the servants. Li Yunxin was writing on the paper when the tip of his brush moved slightly. The little sister wanted to return to her young master's side in a panic, but she found that no matter how she sprinted, she was still walking in the same place. The 2 girls panicked and wanted to return to their young master's side, but found that no matter how fast they ran, they were still in the same place. Then Li Yunxin glanced at Yu Meng. The 2 girls are really loyal and cute. So young Master Yu, is this true or false? Yu Meng opened his mouth slightly and looked at the 2 sisters, then at Li Yunxin. It's true. Li Yunxin took a step back and narrowed his eyes. He stared at the magical paper in front of him. Then he looked at the ground. He seemed to be comparing notes. Then he walked forward again and used his brush to change a few points. However, in Yu Meng's eyes, he had only added a few more strokes on the paper that had already been dyed crimson by him. Tell me about it. Li Yunxin picked up his brush and began to draw the magical third layer. Yu Meng frowned and let out a long sigh. All right, that's enough. Okay, I know you are suspicious of me, but I am thinking too hard. I didn't do anything to harm you. If you want to know, I will tell you. I was conscious when I was born. I can recognize people, remember things, and can speak. It's like the current me has suddenly been reincarnated into a child's body. Yu Meng looked at Li Yunxin. This is the truth. If you want to laugh, just laugh. But the truth. But Li Yunxin didn't laugh. He didn't look at him. He continued to stare at the magical paper, his hand continuously drawing. It was as if the miraculous experience that Yu Meng described, which made Wuxia and Lily's jaws drop, was just a common story that he had heard 1,000 times. He said, "Oh." Yu Meng was stunned. Then he heard Li Yunxin say, "Continue." He looked at the sea of fire around him, then at Wuxia and Lily. He sighed. Actually, there is another person. Or I don't know what it is. In my body or mind, he spoke to me at that time. I said it might be a person because he has a name. He told me that he was living in my body by accident. There will be a way. The rumors in the market. That I helped the Yu family through whatever storm, whatever wave. It's all because of him. Li Yunxin finally turned his head to look at him. Then his face revealed a faint but very strange expression. "Ha, young master you. What a good young master you. This is what a main character should be like." Yu Meng didn't know why, but he frowned. Li Yunxin turned his face back. He hesitated for a while, then started to write again. But it was much slower than the first time. Although the strokes were still like a storm, at least the arm was no longer an afterimage. When you were 10 years old, you ran to the roof to play at night and got struck by lightning. What's going on? It was the old Shin in my head who told me to go to the roof. Yu Meng thought for a while and spoke more fluently. Oh. That old grandpa's surname is Shin. Li Yunxin said. Li Yunxin's performance influenced him. This Li Yunxin, he behaved calmly, he even said something that even he couldn't believe, but Li Yunxin was still calm. Yu Meng kept the secret in the past because he was afraid of getting himself into trouble. But now that it had come to this, he suddenly realized, maybe Li Yunxin knew something. And he himself might be able to solve the mystery tonight. So he looked at Wuxia and Lily, who were too shocked to speak, and continued, I was 10 years old then. That night, old Shin suddenly asked me to go to the roof. He said an old friend came to visit. Old Shin was usually in the same body as me, so of course we had a good relationship. Plus, I heard it was an old friend. Although I was born with consciousness and knew how to recognize people, the truth is, I don't remember who I am. I asked old Shin, he said if I didn't drink Meng Po's soul-forgetting soup when I was reincarnated, then why can't I remember who I am in my past life? However, old Shin only said that I'm a person born with knowledge. That's why he reincarnated into my body by accident. When he said this, he saw Li Yunxin smile and shake his head. Yu Meng didn't know what Li Yunxin was smiling about, so he paused and continued, I asked him about his past, but he didn't say a word. He only said that night I did as he said and climbed to the roof in the middle of the night. The sky was clear and the air was clear. But suddenly, a dark cloud floated over and it started raining. Li Yunxin's pen stopped drawing on the magic paper. He turned to look at him. What kind of dark cloud? After saying this, he didn't answer randomly. He waved his left hand and dense water vapor rose from his sleeve. He pointed to the sky. Was it like this? Yu Meng followed his finger and looked at the sky. Actually, the sky was already bright at this time. But they were in the middle of a sea of fire. The thick smoke produced by the fire pressed heavily into the sky, blocking the sun completely as if it was night. But the dark clouds formed by the smoke were reflected red by the fire on the ground, like rolling lava or fire clouds in the sky. And under these fire clouds Yu Meng saw a green dark cloud. It was lower than the smoke. He was stunned for a moment, then he widened his eyes and looked at Li Yunxin. Yes. I remember it clearly. That night the cloud was very low. It seemed like it could be reached with one's hand, and it floated over suddenly. Then, the old Shin in my head was talking to someone in the cloud. But it wasn't really talking, they didn't make a sound, I could only hear a few words in my head. I still remember. The person in the cloud said that Old Xian was too ostentatious and would be found by them. Old Xian said, "Time is running out, and we should take a risk." I can roughly remember these two sentences. Yu Meng started to frown, because he felt that his head was starting to hurt again. The pain was so bad that it felt like it was going to split open. But he clenched his teeth. Then the two parties seemed to be annoyed. The person in the cloud struck down with a lightning bolt, and Old Xian disappeared for a few years. Li Yunxin paused, the tip of his pen hovering over the paper. He frowned slightly and stared at the paper sideways. After thinking for a while, he looked at Yu Meng. "A few years." Then he appeared again later. "Was it when you went to save me?" "You, actually no." Yu Meng opened his eyes wide. Then he nodded and sighed, "Yes." There was no news for a few years. Then he suddenly appeared one day. "He told me to go out of the city to save someone. It was you." "Huh. I knew it." Li Yunxin sneered, as expected. "From the day I entered the city of Wei, I was set up. Good trick. Good courage. Good courage." "What happened after that?" Yu Meng frowned even more. "That was the only time." "Then it was a few days ago. The Yu family was destroyed. Old Xian once told me, if I had nowhere else to go, I should come to Changji town. When I was young, my teacher Lu Gongjiao once taught me martial arts, and accidentally found out that there was an Old Xian in my head. But I don't even know when Old Xian instructed my master to do something. A few days ago he told me to come here and wait for my teacher." At this point he seemed to have an unbearable headache. He just pounded his head with his fist and didn't say anything else. Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then he turned around and continued to write on the magic paper. After another 15 minutes he said, "You want to figure it out, and so do I. Then this magic formation here, it might be able to remind you of something. But this thing..." He took a deep breath and finished the last few strokes on the paper. By this time he had been listening to Yu Meng for almost an hour. And he had also been drawing on this palm-sized magic paper for almost an hour. The densely packed red dots were superimposed on the surface of the paper. Ordinary people like Yu Meng who didn't practice Taoism could only see some blood-red dots. But for Taoists like Li Yunxin who practiced Taoism, once he immersed his divine sense into the paper, vast, magnificent, brilliant, and like a sea of stars, the scene immediately rushed towards him. A total of 64 layers of formations had been superimposed on this piece of magic paper. In the eyes of mortals, these densely packed red dots were stacked together, but in Li Yunxin's eyes, each layer of the formation was three-dimensional. Patches of red dots crisscrossed. At this time it looked like the starry sky in the universe. And each red dot was a star in the starry sky. In fact, each red dot represented a black stone buried underground. Yu Meng said that there was a black stone mine under Changji town, but it wasn't completely true. In Li Yunxin's eyes and perception there were black stones. But they weren't naturally formed. Someone had dug underground who knew how deep. Then they filled in the black stones one by one. Each of them was as big as a house. They were also connected to each other by the same black stones, layer by layer, densely distributed in this Changji town, under the Toulon River in a huge space. If all the soil and stones in this space were cleared out, Li Yunxin raised his head and looked to the north. In the north, on the opposite side of Toulon River, there was a small mountain. But the fire was about to burn that small mountain. In fact, this magic formation had already started to operate slowly. The fire in the wilderness forest ignited the layer of black stones near the surface. Although it was only the first thin layer of the entire magic formation, the shocking heat produced by the smoldering black stones would be transmitted to the second layer. Then the third layer, the fourth layer, the fifth layer, and even the 64th layer. This magic formation was not driven by spiritual energy. Instead, it was driven by the heat produced by the burning black stones. Li Yunxin suddenly thought of something. He turned to look at Yu Meng. "What's the name of that old Xian?" Yu Meng thought for a while. He said his real name is Xin Mu. Chapter 346. Xin Mu. Li Yunxin frowned slightly and repeated the name. He did not seem to have any impression of it. Therefore, he refocused his attention on the composition of the formation on the magic paper in his hand. He could not understand what this formation was used for and how it worked. This formation did not seem to belong to Daotong Kenzo or the painting sect. It had a shocking simplicity. It only relied on countless repetitive dots to connect and used pure heat to operate. In terms of state, the state of this thing was actually slightly higher than the Taoism of the three sects. However, because Li Yunxin did not understand what would happen once it was fully operated, he tried to draw this composition first, and then slowly find out the principle of operation. However, he searched for a quarter of an hour. A quarter of an hour. In a quarter of an hour, Li Yunxin could learn an unfamiliar dharma of the true state, and he could understand the key to enter the true state from the transcendent state. But he still did not understand the meaning of this formation. Therefore, he hesitated for a moment. In fact, this formation could be used by him. He had been hiding in the wild forest for the past few days, running around with the help of the towering fire, to make a formation. However, compared to the precision and meticulousness of the black stone formation, his formation was rough and bold. And because it was rough and bold, it had a high tolerance for mistakes. There were many things that he could use. For example, this black stone formation. When it was operating, it would attract the chi of fire between heaven and earth. This place was next to the river. When the chi of fire and chi of water intersected, it would produce thunder. He could actually borrow this black stone array and use it as the key to his own array formation. This was the last place he needed to build. If he could borrow this formation, he could save 6 days of effort. 6 days. Right now, all the Taoist priests and swordsmen in the world were looking for him. How many incidents would happen in 6 days? However, he was not sure if this formation would go wrong in the future after he borrowed it. This was one of the rare times when Li Yunxin was uncertain. He thought about this for a long time. In the end, he sighed and turned to look at Yu Meng. If I'm not wrong, then Shenmu called you here to activate the formation. Now the array has started to operate, but I still haven't figured out what it looks like when it's fully activated. Based on the current speed, this formation will only be fully operational after 5 days. He frowned again. Looking at you now, you still look harmless. But I don't know what you'll remember in 5 days and who you'll be. I don't have time to stay here for too long. So what do you want to do now? Yu Meng hesitated for a while and said in a low voice, I want to remember. The blood feud of the Yu clan. His words were suddenly interrupted. A voice from the heavens interrupted him. Suddenly, a continuous buzzing sound came from the fiery clouds above their heads. It sounded like someone had pressed half an iron ruler on the table and flicked it. The sounds came one after another, and in the end the clouds were shaken to the point that they started to tumble and countless small clouds poked out. A loud shout came from the fiery clouds. Li Yunxin, you've cruelly harmed lives and committed a heinous sin. Where can you escape to now? As soon as the voice fell, another buzzing sound came from the fiery clouds. The fiery clouds in the sky rolled down. There were actually hundreds of cultivators riding on the clouds, surrounding Li Yunxin and the entire Changji town. The cultivators stood on top of the clouds, their faces indistinguishable. But the fiery clouds they were riding on were tumbling and surging endlessly. The imposing manner was extremely frightening. It was as if the Celestials had sent their celestial soldiers and generals. In the next moment, everything on the ground would be crushed into powder. Yu Meng, Wu Su and Lili had never seen such a scene before. They were stunned and looked up at the godlike cultivators in the sky. Then they turned to look at Li Yunxin. They are. Li Yunxin took a deep breath and put away the magic paper and brush. He sneered, buzzing like flies. They're probably Kenzo people. After saying this, he threw his head back and laughed out loud. His laughter was not inferior to the voice from the cloud, and it caused the surrounding fire waves to scatter in all directions. You want to keep me here with just 100 people? Tell me who you are. How many heroes are there? How many heroes are there? He spoke in a heroic manner, but the iron chain in his hand trembled slightly. At Mount June, 100 people ambushed him. Now another 100 people. But now these 100 people dared to show themselves. It seemed that their cultivation was much higher than before. Moreover, they were Kenzo. The swordsmen of the Kenzo were not as exquisite as the Taoists, but they were more powerful. He had to be an idiot to stand here and let them attack him. Thus he already had a plan in his mind, find the right opportunity to numb them. Then he made a feint, turned around and fled. As for this Yu Meng, he would stay here. This kind of person was born with a clear mind. He even had an old grandpa in his head. With this kind of main character template, his luck wouldn't be too bad. Moreover, there were two girls who liked to laugh beside him. The cultivators in the clouds didn't seem to be very angry after hearing Li Yunxin's arrogant words. It was the same loud and clear voice from before. Kenzo Lingshu Sword Sect, Chuliao Sword Sect, Lingguang Sword Sect and Wuyan Sword Sect. We are here to kill the devil. Devil, can these people keep you here? Li Yunxin laughed loudly. I thought it was some high-class stuff. So it's you guys who are inferior. Lingshu Sword Sect. Sect leader Ming Zhenzi, I killed most of your disciples. You still dare to come here? Didn't you wet your pants in the sky a few days ago? As far as I know, there's also your Kenzo's Chongshao Grotto near the Qin Kingdom and Yi Kingdom. That Chongshao Grotto didn't come to chase me but sent you small fries. Ah, I remember. Li Yunxin acted as if he suddenly realized something. That Chongshao Grotto's minister Yu Liaozi, a few months ago, went to the Li Kingdom with a few smelly ox-nosed Daoists to chase after the Ghost Emperor. In the end, he betrayed his friends and survived. However, his cultivation has been completely destroyed. Now that he's lost his courage, he only dares to send you guys here? After he said this, he finally heard Ming Zhenzi shout. Li Yunxin, you reckless demon. Even now, you still dare to speak arrogantly and insult our Kenzo Sendo. He indeed came, but he didn't intend to come. There was indeed a disciple sent by Kenzo who accidentally discovered Li Yunxin's whereabouts. He didn't dare to act blindly without thinking and hurriedly reported to his sect. Changji Town was located at the border between the Qin Kingdom and the Yi Kingdom. This place was actually the High Heaven Sword Sect's dojo. Since the three nearby Kenzo sects had gathered to capture Li Yunxin as the host, the High Heaven Sword Sect naturally couldn't sit idly by. Moreover, Ming Zhenzi really did hate him. Up in the sky, he was scared by this demon's gaze and ran more than 400 li. How could he bear this kind of humiliation later on? At this moment he was also on the cloud, standing shoulder to shoulder with another sect leader. After scolding Li Yunxin, he frowned and turned his face. Don't talk nonsense with him. Finish this quickly. This demon is sinister and cunning. Although he's surrounded by us now, I'm afraid he's looking for an opportunity to escape. If we let him go this time, there will be endless trouble in the future. The person beside him was the sect leader of the Five-Sword Sect, Jin Guangzi. This sect leader looked to be a middle-aged female cultivator with a dignified appearance. The mountain dojo was in the northwest of the Yi Kingdom, facing the Li Kingdom. Hearing Ming Zhenzi's words, she sneered. The four sects are all out, where can he go? And this time I brought two things that can guarantee that he won't be able to escape even if he doesn't want to. Saying so, she flicked her sleeve and an item appeared in her palm. This item was round and shiny. It looked like a transparent glass, but golden light flowed inside. Upon closer inspection, it was actually countless small swords. Ming Zhenzi didn't recognize this item and only frowned. What is this? Jin Guangzi laughed. Oh. Senior Ming Zhenzi's dojo is in such a remote place like the Yu Kingdom. And you don't often go to the Cloud Mountain, so it's normal that you don't recognize this item. This is called the Glass Sword Heart. It was made by a sage of our Kenzo in the past and has been passed down from generation to generation. Now that it's in my hands, does Senior know the Fog-Lock Toad Palace of the Langya Heavenly Abode in Daotong? This Glass Sword Heart specializes in breaking through the illusion realm and can restrain that magic treasure. With this item, where can that demon escape to? Ming Zhenzi frowned. Then what about the other item? Jin Guangzi laughed. The other item is something I brought from the Cloud Mountain. After saying this, he stared at Ming Zhenzi for a while. Senior brother said that previously when Qing Kongzi was chasing Li Yunxin, he tossed out the corpses of the two demon generals under him before he was counter-killed. Then, this Li Yunxin is actually a demon that values comradeship? Ming Zhenzi was slightly startled and immediately said, Junior Marshal Sister, don't think too much. That Li Yunxin killed Qing Kongzi in rage not because of comradeship, but because... He paused. But because of the powerlessness of being unable to control the life and death of the demons under him, which made him furious. These two things sound similar, but they're not the same thing. Jin Guangzi listened to his words and sized him up strangely. Then she laughed. Where did Senior Marshal Brother hear this strange reasoning? What is unable to control? Does Senior Marshal Brother know what that Li Yunxin is thinking in his heart? Ming Zhenzi said seriously, Junior Marshal Sister, don't take it seriously. Jin Guangzi shook her head and raised her hand to interrupt him. I know Senior Marshal Brother. You're a little afraid of that Li Yunxin. But Senior Marshal Brother, don't forget. We sword cultivators first cultivate sword's courage. If Senior Marshal Brother's sword's courage is gone, how far are you from falling into the demonic path? As for what that Qing Kongzi did before, alas. He found the right method by accident but used it at the wrong time. Jin Guangzi put her hands behind her back and looked down. She saw that Li Yunxin was standing in a sea of fire and saying something to the other three mortals. She smiled faintly. The demon general under Li Yunxin, regardless of whether he cares or not, will always be useful. Why did this Li Yunxin make the seniors of the Heavenly Passage and School return in defeat? Because he's both a demon and a cultivator. This is his advantage, but it's also his disadvantage. The nun narrowed her eyes slightly. He has to have a Dao heart. He'll always have the tribulation of desire. Even if he didn't have it in the past, we'll slowly make him have it now. Kill his family, kill his true love. Destroy the things he cares about one by one, and see what happens to his inner demon. When that time comes, he'll definitely destroy himself. Finished speaking, Jin Guangzi raised her hand and threw the glazed sword heart into the sky. Strangely enough, this thing was a ball in her hand. But once it left her hand, it immediately turned into a faint cloud and mist, dispersing into the fire clouds in the blink of an eye. It takes a quarter of an hour to set up the glazed sword heart, Jin Guangzi said. If we keep him here for a quarter of an hour, he'll definitely die. Ming Zhenzi was also the sect master of a sect. But at this moment he'd lost so many disciples, and this Jin Guangzi mocked him time and time again, so he was already indignant. As he sneered. A quarter of an hour. That Li Yunxin is extremely cunning. If Junior Marshal Sister doesn't get everyone to act together and delay him, I'm afraid he won't even last 2 breaths of time. But just as he finished speaking, he saw that Li Yunxin seemed to have explained something to the 3 mortals. He raised his head and said loudly, This prince is not in the mood to play with you trash. When I have time in the future, I'll pay you a visit one by one. As for now, I'll take my leave for now. Finished speaking, he shot into the sea of fire like a bolt of lightning. But just as he fled 20 feet away, he suddenly heard a stern shout come from the cloud again. Li Yunxin, look who this is. A figure fell from the cloud at the same time. It stopped after falling a bit more than 10 feet. As it turned out, it had been tied up by a rope made of some unknown material and thrown down. Li Yunxin turned his head to take a look, then stopped. He frowned in the raging fire. Ming Zhenzi also saw this person. It seemed to be a beautiful and charming woman dressed in black. Her waist was tightened by the rope, which made her even more enchanting. Just looking at her face and expression, she didn't look like a mortal nor a cultivator. He frowned. Who is this person? Did he really stop? Kun Wuzi of Langya Cave Paradise caught 2 little monsters at the Dongting. They are the monster generals under the devil Li Yunxin. One is called the Black Dragon Messenger, and the other is called the Red Dragon Messenger. This one is the Black Dragon Messenger. The golden photon took a slight step and the fiery cloud beneath his feet parted. He landed beside the Black Dragon Envoy, the demon general transformed from the black cat that Li Yunxin was riding on, and Fairy Chong. She raised her voice and said, Li Yunxin, this monster general under your command is loyal to you. He suffered the astral wind in the grotto of Yunshan for more than a month, but he didn't even say a word about you. Now, since he doesn't want to say anything, it's useless. It's just nice to kill him in front of the battle today, as a sacrifice to the flag. What do you think? Li Yunxin was silent for a while. Then, a crimson mist suddenly appeared under his feet and lifted him up into the sky like a wave. A thin and long fiery mist, like a sword rising from the ground, sent him not far away from Sergeant Eugene Kwong. He stared at the sheriff carefully for a while. The black cat's eyes were originally closed weakly. Now they were slightly opened, whispering, Pai King. Li Yunxin sighed slightly. Silly girl. Why can't you say it? Why suffer like this? The sheriff fairy slowly blinked her eyes. Cloud Mountain. Floating around. The scenery is not bad. The wind is strong and cool. It's not suffering. But my king, I haven't eaten meat for a long time. I miss it very much. Li Yunxin looked at her, gritted his teeth and laughed. Stinky Taoist priests are sour and stingy, how can they be willing to give you meat to eat? When I kill them one by one in the future, you can eat the tender skin and meat of these Taoist priests and swordsmen. Golden Light smiled, since it's heartache. It's better to hand over the jade inscriptions. Or go back to Yunshan with me. Who knows if there's a chance of survival? Why do you have to stubbornly resist? She took 2 steps on the cloud again, but everyone says that you, Li Yunxin, are cruel and heartless. But it doesn't seem like that today. Did you get into an accident and become affectionate? This is the case. If I kill your loved ones one by one in the future, won't you die of pain? But the black cat demon exhaled a few breaths and whispered, My king, naturally don't believe the nonsense of the stinky Taoist priests. If my king hands over anything, not only I will still die but my king will also die. I can't be protected. Li Yunxin was silent for a while. Then he looked at the black cat. Are you afraid of death? The cat demon laughed. I'm not afraid. Good girl. Li Yunxin suddenly flew back a few steps, looked at the Taoist priests in the sky one by one, and then raised his hand. Lingshu Sword Sect, Chuliao Sword Sect, Lingguang Sword Sect, Wian Sword Sect. You dare to come and kill me and even dare to tell me your name, you really have guts. When he said these words, his voice was calm. It was not as indifferent as Ming Zhenzi imagined, nor as angry as Golden Light imagined. It was just cold and gloomy. He looked at Golden Light again. I have always been the one to threaten others with this kind of thing. You're also the first person to threaten me with something like this. Before that, Kun Wuzi of Langya Cave knew not to force me to death, and imprison my 2 disciples in Yunshan so that I would not take action for fear of harming the innocent. But now you really have guts. Then he shook his head and laughed. There are some things I don't like to say. After all, we are all adults, saying it is very shameful. But since you have the guts to come face to face with me today, then I will also let you know. You dare to touch a hair of hers. Within 7 days I will destroy your whole sect. If you dare to hurt a finger of hers within a month, your 4 sects will all die. The swordsmen in the sky were all silent for a while. Then they suddenly roared with laughter, so loud that the fire clouds were about to disperse. Golden Light did not laugh. She calmly stared at Li Yunxin as if she had discovered something interesting. Then she raised her hand, and calmly and indifferently waved it. A strand of hair fell from the cat demon's ear, and in the blink of an eye, it was swallowed by the fire clouds under her feet. How can you say such a thing? She looked at Li Yunxin in confusion. Where did you get such arrogant courage? She reached out again and pinched one of the cat demon's wrists. She stared straight at Li Yunxin. She exerted force with her 2 fingers, and there was a crisp cracking sound. Don't you know that you are about to die? It was at this time that a crisp sound came from the sky. An invisible barrier enveloped the whole of Changji town. The glazed sword heart array had been completed. Chapter 347. A quarter of an hour. Less than 30 feet away from Li Yunxin, Jin Guangzi turned his head to look at Ming Zhenzi above as if there was no one else around and smiled. Your biggest mistake in the past was to mistakenly believe that this Li Yunxin was cold and heartless. But a truly cold and heartless person would never emphasize this point. For example, you and me. So to kill him you have to use emotion. These men don't understand you, but I can see through you. The Taoist nun turned her head and looked at Li Yunxin. Then she pointed a finger at the cat demon and said softly, Cut. A small golden sword suddenly formed above the cat demon's head and then fiercely pierced down. It was too late, but it happened very quickly. At the moment when the golden sword was about to pierce through the cat demon, Li Yunxin immediately leaned forward and shook it away with a bang. Then he cut the ropes and pulled her over. Jin Guangzi laughed loudly. The red cloud under her feet suddenly rose up and returned to the formation. I thought you were really a heartless and peerless demon, but now you've become a soft-hearted stupid demon. Could it be that you couldn't tell that I was using that strike to test you? Can't you see that I delayed you for a quarter of an hour just to complete this formation? Li Yunxin picked up the weak cat demon, raised her head and smiled. She threw her to Yu Meng's side and said, How do you know that I have been waiting here for you for a quarter of an hour, not to complete my magic formation? After saying this, he shook his right hand. The cultivators on the cloud couldn't see what was in his hand, but they could hear a burst of crashing sound. When they looked down again, the area below Li Yunxin, the area covered by the glazed sword heart, was completely extinguished. Then they heard the demon shout, "Go!" His shout was meant for Yu Meng to hear. None of the cultivators on the clouds had opened their heaven eyes. Because he had opened the third eye, he often encountered ghosts and monsters, which disturbed his state of mind. The wandering ghosts in the world were as harmless as dust to cultivators. If he was not a rogue Daoist in Jianghu, who didn't have a reason to cultivate such magical power. Note 1. If he really needed it, he could just use a talisman. Therefore they didn't notice it, but Yu Meng clearly saw that in Li Yunxin's hand, there was a green iron chain. Hundreds of thousands of ghosts were bound to this misty green iron chain. Before this, Li Yunxin had used these ghosts to clear a path in the fire to Yu Meng, Wuxia and Lily. Just now when he rose to the top of the cloud, that long iron chain hung down from the sky. It was a terrifying scene. The wailing ghosts were like fruits on a vine that hung from the clouds to the ground. One by one Li Yunxin threw them into the ground. They turned into rays of green light and disappeared. Yu Meng realized that Li Yunxin was secretly casting a spell, but he didn't know what his purpose was. At this moment, when he saw the fire in front of him suddenly disappear and heard Li Yunxin's thunderous shout from the cloud, he was stunned for a moment. Did he cast a spell and used up thousands of ghosts just to give them a way out? He looked up in surprise, but he could only see the fiery red sky, the vague figures of people and the faint golden light. He couldn't see Li Yunxin's real appearance. However, Wuxia and Lily by his side did not delay. Li Yunxin tossed the cat demoness down. The weak demoness revealed her original form and steadily landed at Lily's feet. It was a big black cat with a long and gorgeous beard. Its entire body was black and shiny like brocade. Lily was stunned for a moment, then she hugged the heavy and soft big cat. Wuxia pulled Yu Meng. "Young master, let's go." Yu Meng was pulled by her and staggered for a few steps. Suddenly he looked up and shouted, "Li Yunxin." But he, Wuxia and Lily were just ordinary people at the moment. The immortals and demons who were about to fight were high up in the clouds. How could they hear his shout? In the next moment, a series of thunderclaps suddenly erupted in the sky. Li Yunxin had revealed her dragon form, which was 1,000 feet long. She leaped through the clouds in thunder and pounced on the swordsman above the clouds. When Qi Wen's real body appeared, the air blast caused the low-pressure fire cloud to shake slightly. With just a few movements of his body, the ferocious dragon head had already reached the top of the cloud. The space covered by the magic treasure glazed sword heart was huge. The whole Changji town and a long stretch of Toulon River was covered. Ordinary people would need at least a quarter of an hour to run from one end to the other. However, such a space was like a small fish tank to Li Yunxin, who had revealed her true form. He circled around the inner wall and raised his head again. It spat out a burst of vigorous and shiny purple gas, and with a boom it exploded in the sky. Countless electric snakes spun and spread out. The upper half of the glazed sword heart's magic shield was almost plowed by the lightning. The cultivators at the top of the cloud with lower cultivation levels fell from the sky like dumplings. They didn't even have the chance to struggle. Because the dragon's 9 heavens thunderfire had burned them in an instant. After his fierce attack, the fire cloud lit up with all kinds of mysterious lights. The cultivators had taken out their protective magic treasures and released a dense number of flying swords, all of which struck the gigantic dragon's body with a series of clanging sounds. However, the golden light was standing next to Ming Zhenzi. She quietly squinted and watched Li Yunxin deal with the Daoists, but didn't make a move. "Look." She even smiled. She was indifferent to the deaths and injuries of the low-level disciples. "Look at what he's doing." In the time she said this, Li Yunxin had already gained the upper hand. He suddenly dispersed the cloud in the west and rushed into the crowd. The swordsman's flying swords could cut through metal and stone like tofu, but how could the scales of the dragons be compared to the metal and stone of the mortal world? Because of the bombardment of flying swords and spells, Li Yunxin's body burst out dense sparks, like dense raindrops splashing on the ground like mist. But the flying swords of the cultivators were like needles to his dragon body. Occasionally some of them could penetrate, but with a sweep of his body they were all swept away. This tyrannical demon rushed into the crowd, opened his mouth, and sucked in 6 or 7 people along with the thunder cloud. With a bite and a close he chewed them to pieces. Then with a loud bang he turned into a large cloud of blood mist and spat out, blasting a series of disciples riding on flying swords into pieces. Carrying the wind and thunder with it, it swam to a place where the crowd was densely packed. The scales suddenly opened and closed, and with a series of loud kacha kacha kacha, there was another explosion of thunder that filled the sky, and another 8 or 9 unlucky people who couldn't dodge in time were killed. The dragons with strong bodies were like fierce tigers rushing into a flock of sheep. In just 2 breaths they killed to their heart's content. Then they turned around and rushed down, quickly breaking away from the battle and pouncing on the other side. But there were still high-level swordsmen with higher cultivation in the crowd. Just a few hundred feet after he descended from the cloud, a dark and heavy flying sword hid among the broken limbs and chunks of flesh that rained down like raindrops, hitting the dragon's neck right in the middle. Almost no sound was heard, and there were no sparks or electric sparks like when ordinary flying swords hit his body. The black sword silently sank into his body, and in the blink of an eye, it pierced through his body. When it went in, no wound could be seen, but when it came out, a terrible big hole immediately exploded on the dragon's neck, and the dragon bones with golden light flowing inside could almost be seen. Li Yunxin's body suddenly trembled as if he was in extreme pain, and with a loud bang he flew up into the sky. But at this time the protective barrier of the glazed sword heart played its role. No matter how high he flew, he was stuck at a certain height. From the wound on his neck, the golden dragon blood really sprinkled down like a huge waterfall. Once it was poured on the fire cloud, it immediately burned with a loud bang. If it was not poured on the cloud but on the person, that person let out a short scream, and was immediately corroded by the golden blood into white bones. After being seriously injured, Li Yunxin let out a heaven-shaking roar. Immediately, 2 golden flowing lights appeared beside him. It was a protective formation formed by the 2 golden deities. He fiercely dived down again. Staring at the cloud that shot out the black sword, he shouted, "Fight!" But this voice, it sounded like it was not made by him alone. But at the same time, there was another rough, bold and unrestrained male voice. After this shout, in the void in front of Li Yunxin, an incomparably huge and powerful man suddenly appeared. This man's body was cold and he had a dignified appearance. His pair of eyes emitted cold stars, and his 2 curved eyebrows were like brushed paint. Looking at him, he actually had an awe-inspiring aura that even 10,000 men could not defeat. Right now, this huge human figure was in the sky, and one of his fingers was as big as a human. It really looked like a god from the heavens had descended to the mortal world, indomitable and indomitable. Once this huge human figure was formed, the cold light in his eyes shot straight at the cloud, and then he shouted angrily, "Where's the wine?" With this extremely deep and powerful roar, he raised his fist that was as big as a small mountain and fiercely smashed it. The swordsman immediately knew that Li Yunxin had used a horrifying spiritual treasure. However, as soon as this man appeared, the hiding place of the person who had injured Li Yunxin also lit up with dazzling spiritual light at the same time. A solemn and majestic voice chanted a spell. "Where are all the gods on duty, the guardians of the myriad realms? Under the order of Patriarch Wenjun, come quickly and help me." Every time the cultivator chanted a god's name, a huge golden light incarnation appeared. Although these angry golden light deities were only half the height of the stalwart man, their bodies were surrounded by treasure light, and the sabers and spears in their hands were awe-inspiring. They gathered into a formation with 8 sides and 6 arrows, and they swarmed forward to block the man's fist. However, boom! These gods were shattered by this man's fist, and they turned into flowing lights that scattered in all directions as if they were made of paper. The person hiding behind the cloud immediately chanted another spell. At the same time, he splashed out talismans that filled the sky and released 2 sword arrays to protect himself. Then he let out a cold laugh and said, "Insignificant tricks. Look at me." However, there was another loud rumbling sound. A large stretch of clouds was smashed into pieces by the unstoppable iron fist. Those talismans and sword formations were all turned into flying ash. Before the voice could finish speaking, his physical body was also smashed. At this moment, the huge and majestic man looked up at the sky and laughed, shouting, "Where is the tiger?" Then his figure faded and disappeared into the void. After a full 3 breaths, the high sky was quiet for a full 3 breaths. Then the disciples shouted, "Immortal Chan has fallen! Immortal Chan has fallen!" At this moment, only a dozen breaths had passed since the golden light said the last sentence. During this time Ming Zhenzi only had time to frown slightly, pause for a moment, and then look at the place where Li Yunxin was fighting. Then he heard the swordsman on the cloud shout loudly, "Immortal Chan has fallen!" He was dumbfounded. In just a dozen breaths. On the scorched ground that was still emitting green smoke, the 3 people who were shouted at by Li Yunxin to go, only ran a few dozen steps. That Immortal Chan of Chu Liao sword sect, a sword cultivator who was good at fighting, was killed by Li Yunxin. This scene immediately evoked a terrible memory in his heart. That day, Li Yunxin stood in the blazing flames, bathed in Qing Kongzi's flesh and blood, and glanced at him eerily. Ming Zhenzi couldn't breathe and choked. "Junior sister, why are you standing there? He has already killed 1 person. Do you want him to kill them one by one?" Jin Guangxi's expression remained unchanged. High in the clouds, she looked indifferently at the heavily injured Li Yunxin who was protected by the 2 golden light gods and rushed into the battle. She said, "Keep watching." Ming Zhenzi abruptly waved his big sleeve. "What are you looking at? You formed the glazed sword heart array but didn't release it. Do you know that you have trapped Li Yunxin and your fellow cultivators?" That demon rushed into the crowd like a tiger rushing into a flock of sheep. "Do you plan to stay and fight him alone?" Behind Jin Guangxi and Ming Zhenzi were the disciples of the Wujin sword sect. Now their sect master didn't move and they didn't move either. Even though the cultivators of the other 2 sects were fighting Li Yunxin, they acted as if they were their master. Their expressions were indifferent, as if the situation had nothing to do with them. This made Ming Zhenzi look like a timid and weak secular person, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Jin Guangdian sighed. "Junior brother, you can continue reading." Like a parent who was finally annoyed by her child, she raised her hand and pointed at Li Yunxin from afar. "Li Yunxin has revealed the incarnation of Shinryu. According to what you said, rushing into the crowd is indeed like a tiger rushing into a flock of sheep. But look at why he no longer relies on his advantage of coming like lightning and leaving like the wind. He first rushes for a while, then turns around and leaves. What if he rushes over when the other side has no time to support him? His physical body is tyrannical and his speed is beyond our reach. It is best to use this kind of attack and escape method. But look at him from just now until now. He hasn't been fighting like this. He is." Ming Zhenzi was restless at first. But listening to Jin Guangxi speak in such a calm and steady tone, her heart slowly calmed down. At this time, looking in the direction that Jin Guangxi pointed, she also saw the door. Li Yunxin was indeed strange. Note 1. This was explained in a chapter a long time ago. But I can't find which chapter it is. The gist of it is that people often die in the world. Although ghosts are not common, cultivators cultivate spiritual power. The ghosts that have not been collected in time always like to go to places with more spiritual power. Therefore there may be more ghosts around cultivators. If you open the magical power of the third eye, you can see ghosts 24 hours a day. It is quite scary to suddenly see a ghost face when you open your eyes after meditating. Most ghosts are not worth paying attention to, so cultivators will not deliberately open the magical power of the third eye. As the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind. Chapter 348. He was a dragon with thick skin and fast speed. Logically speaking, the best way to fight was to keep a close eye on a small group and chase them until they were all dead. Then he would kill the others. But now he was like a lion charging into a pack of hyenas. He ambushed here for a while, but before he could kill them all, he ambushed there for a while. It was as if he was afraid that he would miss something. He looked at this scene and thought carefully for a while. His eyes suddenly lit up and he turned to look at the golden photon. "You mean, humph?" The golden photon sneered. "Look at how powerful he is now. But in fact, I'm just teasing him like playing with animals." After saying that, he suddenly raised his hand and pointed to the ground. The next moment, 3 thin golden rays suddenly formed above the heads of the 3 mortals who were running on the scorched ground, stumbling to avoid the burning trees and embers, then turned into small swords. But the small swords didn't stab down. Instead they hovered above their heads and ran along with them. This strange phenomenon made Yu Meng, Wusu and Lily stop uneasily. They looked up, and saw that in the sky, the gigantic dragon body was circling and killing, not letting a single cultivator escape. The rolling fire clouds were stirred up by the wind and thunder, turning into a gigantic red whirlpool. And above their heads, the tip of the small golden sword stared into their eyes, as if it was an illusion that they couldn't get rid of. "Young master." Wusu uneasily grabbed Yu Meng's arm and called out. She looked at the sword raise above her head, Yu Meng's head and Lily's head, and didn't know what to do for a moment. This was a powerful force that she couldn't imagine or understand. This force didn't belong to the mortal world, but at this moment, it made her hair stand on end. The clouds in the sky were vast and indistinct. She didn't even know who or why had created such a thing. At this moment she finally felt the humbleness and insignificance of being immortal. So insignificant that she couldn't even understand it. "Don't move, it's a Daoist spell." Yu Meng frowned. The light sword was only 2 fists away from their heads. The sword was so bright that it lit up the surroundings like it was daytime. Yu Meng watched for a while, then reached out to pull out the small sword in Wusu's hand, raised it above his head and approached it. After hesitating for a while, he touched the frozen light with the slightly trembling cold blade of his sword. Wusu cried out softly in fear, "Young master." But the blade passed through. Nothing happened. The frozen light was still hanging there, moving with their movements, pointing straight to the ground. However, the blade of the sword remained unscathed. In fact, the temperature of the sword didn't change at all. Yu Meng slowly put down his sword and let out a sigh. "All right, let's." At this moment he suddenly heard a woman's voice from high up in the sky. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and calm, and it was transmitted into everyone's ears. "Li Yunxin, you killed one of my Kenzo's enlightened masters, so I'll kill one of yours." In the next moment the world in his eyes seemed to have become very, very slow. He saw the gigantic body of the dragon on top of the sky suddenly turn its head to look down. His antlers were crimson red, and the fire surrounding him was stirred into small whirlpools that slowly spread because of his movements. His snow-white mane danced in the wind, like ripples on the water. He dived downwards. The clouds around him billowed, accompanied by dozens of flying swords that were also slowly descending. Then a thought appeared in Yu Meng's mind. That thought was so terrifying that he didn't want to think about it. He turned his head because of this thought, but the entire world in his eyes was so slow that when he turned his head he felt that the world was also spinning, causing him to feel suffocated, dizzy and nauseous. Then he saw the person beside him. Wusu's eyes widened as he also looked at the sky. This little girl also heard the sound. She turned her head faster than Yu Meng. She stretched out her slender and long arms. Her lake green sleeves were flung open by her movements, and the edges of the sleeves trembled slowly like water, revealing a lotus root-like forearm. Her slender fingers spread open and her light red lips also parted. Her last gaze was still on the top of Yu Meng's head. She stretched out her hand trying to block for her young master, the small sword on his head. The world in Yu Meng's eyes returned to normal. The sword gleam on top of Wusu's head suddenly disappeared. Then the girl's body from head to toe flickered extremely quickly for a moment. It was as if the dazzling radiance had retracted into her slender body, and then disappeared into the ground. She widened her eyes, stared at Yu Meng and froze on the spot. Very quickly she also collapsed. A thin line appeared on the top of her head. But the edge of the line was burnt very smooth, and from the beginning to the end, not a single drop of blood flowed. Yu Meng hesitated for a while, then bent down and grabbed her forcefully. But her body had already become as cold as the sword gleam, as if all the heat had disappeared along with her life. Yu Meng seemed to hear Lily cry something, and heard the woman in the sky say something, as if, through the top of his head, he saw the huge dragon's body sweep across and block the dozens of sword gleams that were rushing down. But those voices and scenes were ethereal and illusory, like the illusory background of this world to him. Now there were only 2 slightly opened lips in his eyes. He thought there were probably still words like, "Young master, be careful," or, "Young master, you're greedy for sleep again," or, "Young master, you're so nice," or, "Young master, check whether the tea is hot or not," or, a lot of miscellaneous things that he didn't have time to blurt out. But in the end these things along with those voices and scenes, all converged into a teardrop. It dripped down. Then something burst into flames beneath the ground. So you saw it. Jin Guangzi only glanced at the ground then looked at Li Yunxin. He darted left and right just to stop those people, to prevent them from hurting those 4 people. When I released this sword he immediately went to save them. Ming Zhenzi widened his eyes in disbelief and was stunned for a while. This Li Yunxin. Could it be? He has feelings at least for now. Jin Guangzi revealed a slightly mocking smile. He's more emotional than us. How ironic. A demon. But it didn't seem to be like this in the past. Ming Zhenzi frowned. It's said that in the past I always felt that something was wrong. I always felt that this might be his scheme. He's cruel and cunning. That's because you never thought of trying. Your brains have already rusted. Jin Guangzi stared at Li Yunxin. That demon seemed to have become fierce because of the girl's death. He was recklessly charging over here. But there were still 3 people on the ground. As he charged forward he was worried about the mortals on the ground. And the cultivators knew his weakness. They besieged him but from time to time they would send people to the ground. This dragon's son acted as if he was putting out a fire and didn't care. He wanted to charge over several times, but was led back several times. Although he still had 2 golden deities to protect him, he still suffered 2 serious injuries. One of his 4 huge dragon claws had been broken, and even the clouds under him were not as dense as before. It seems that this Li Yunxin thinks that he is heartless, and he's also afraid that if he has feelings, others will see through him. Thus he always considers himself to be cold and cunning. He sent many unrelated people to die so that people will think that he cares about nothing. Jin Guangzi shook her head slightly. And you guys? Men. Cultivation. Renouncing feelings and abandoning desires. Slowly you don't even know what feelings are. And this Li Yunxin is a demon and he also cultivates profound Daoist arts, so it's natural to think that he is also heartless. But in my 5 elemental sword sect, there are half male and half female. I've dealt with many matters of love between men and women over the years. These matters I see more clearly than you. Ming Zhenzi frowned and pondered for a long time and finally sighed. Junior sister, compared to Li Yunxin, you're not far off. Jin Guangzi sneered. Not far off. He's just a demon. You stupid people will think that he's so-called cunning. As for now, this Li Yunxin has 2 treasures on him. 2 octagonal ancient scrolls. Look at what he's using to protect himself now. It's the along the river during the Qingming festival painting. The huge human figure that appeared just now is the Divine Lord in the Misty giving slaves to Decai Di Mao, Dharma name Wu Song. Sai, he's a Divine Lord after all. That Jinren Chan's golden light deity Dharma has reached, and he was actually killed with 1 punch. The octagonal ancient scrolls are indeed powerful. Thus, if I don't ask Li Yunxin to use these methods first, how can I kill him later? Jin Guangzi looked at Ming Zhenzi with a half-smile. Jinren Chan and his disciples died a worthy death, forcing him to invite that divine Lord Wu Song. As for next, ask him to invite the other item from the painting, and I can attack and slaughter him like slaughtering pigs and dogs. Ming Zhenzi opened his mouth wanting to say something. But, while he vaguely felt that something was amiss, he still did not say anything. In the end he only smiled. I hope it's as junior sister said. Our Ling Su sword sect has already suffered a great calamity. Now we can only sit and watch junior sister make achievements. I think when junior sister goes back to report, that treasure promised by the 2 sages can be considered to have a wise master. But Jin Guangzi turned around and faced Ming Zhenzi. Then she solemnly bowed and said calmly but sincerely, Senior brother, you don't need to be humble. Senior brother is a perfected Daoist. What kind of magical powers and methods do you have? And now that Li Yunxin, she stretched out her hand and pointed to the distant sky. There were fewer and fewer flying sword lights. Only a dozen or so people were still fighting with Li Yunxin. The Dharma of the painting sect was the worst at fighting, especially in encounters. Thus, after using the talismans that they had prepared beforehand, they could only rely on their powerful demon bodies. Now most of the small fries of the 2 sects had died. The remaining dozen or so people were all capable people with superb sword skills. Li Yunxin, on the other hand, seemed to be a little dispirited. He's already an arrow at the end of its flight, Jin Guangzi said, but we still can't let our guard down. They came prepared. 3 sects, 4 perfected ones. They surrounded and killed a demon of the same true realm. They also used all kinds of schemes and spells. In the end, he still killed a perfected one within 15 breaths of time, and slaughtered 69 Kenzo sword cultivators within 15 minutes. Such a powerful strength is already enough to rank among the great demon kings of the present world. Truly frightening. Jin Guangzi sighed softly again and looked at Ming Zhenzi. Thus we must eliminate him this time. Otherwise there will be no end of trouble. But there's still one thing in this demon's ancient scroll that hasn't come out. It's said that it's an extremely terrifying prehistoric beast that's extremely powerful. Now perfected one Bao and his disciples from the Spirit Lightsword sect are also showing signs of exhaustion. Thus, senior brother, please go into battle. You must force that demon to bring out that vicious beast. Then junior sister can kill this demon. Ming Zhenzi was silent for a while and stared at her. The divine Lord Wu Song that junior sister mentioned easily killed perfected Chan junior sister also said that vicious beast is even more powerful than divine Lord Wu Song. Jin Guangzi looked at him. Yes. That's why senior brother needs to assist perfected one Bao of the Spirit Lightsword sect. But I'll also be killed by that vicious beast, Ming Zhenzi said in a deep voice. Junior sister wants me to die. Jin Guangzi suddenly smiled. This was the first time she showed such a smile. It was not a reserved smile, a mocking smile, or a cold smile. Instead, it was a smile that surfaced from the depths of her memories after thinking for a long time. Her voice had also changed. Previously, it was the dignified voice of a middle-aged lady. But now it had become much gentler, like the distant summer wind. 150 years ago, when senior brother and I became Dao companions in private, he told me that he could die for me. She paused and lowered her eyes to think for a while. She looked like a middle-aged woman. The fine wrinkles at the corners of her eyes were covered by the distant shadows of her eyelashes. There was a little more of a young girl's aura. And this scene stunned Ming Zhenzi. 150 years ago. It seemed to be a very long time ago. He suddenly realized that he had only just connected this woman with the woman from 150 years ago. He had lost that love for a long time. Since he had lost it, why would he deliberately recall it? Later, when senior brother severed his love in order to enter the true state, he didn't say anything. Jin Guangzi smiled and looked up at him in the fire cloud. But I still remember this. Now senior brother can die for me. Ming Zhenzi was stunned. He frowned. He frowned and blinked. Because he suddenly felt that there was something unfamiliar but familiar in his chest. However, this feeling made him afraid. It was as if something that he had abandoned suddenly ran out. Although it was familiar, it was cold and stiff. He suddenly felt a little cold on his face. So he raised his hand and touched it. His fingers were wet. Jin Guangzi looked at him pitifully. The fear of Li Yunxin has broken your Dao heart. It has also caused your love tribulation to come again. I once told you that you can't sever love by running away. She raised her head again and turned to look at the battlefield in the distance. She smiled. Go while your cultivation is still there. This area of 1,000 miles is within my glazed sword heart. You can choose to die in battle or die under my glazed golden light sword. Ming Zhenzi stood silently on the cloud again. He was stunned for 5 breaths. Then he used his hand to wipe the corners of his eyes and looked at the transparent warm liquid in his palm. Soon his face was covered with tears. But he was like an ignorant child. For the first time or after a long time he knew the feeling of crying, but he didn't know why he was crying. After another quarter of an hour he suddenly cried and laughed at the same time. He sang loudly, I have obtained the true immortal Dao, and often recited the crepe myrtle scripture. I have received Emperor Keijin for 3,000 years. As he sang, he stepped on the fire cloud and went into the distance. But Jin Guangzi said again, you have obtained an evil Daoist under Li Yunxin. Ming Zhenzi didn't stop. Instead he waved his sleeve while singing. Lu Gongzan was thrown to the fire cloud beside Jin Guangzi. Then this perfected master who had broken his Dao heart pounced at Li Yunxin. Jin Guangzi sighed softly. Without looking at Lu Laodao he put him into his sleeve. But at this time, the immortals and demons high in the sky didn't notice that the land under their feet was burning again. Chapter 349. Li Yunxin also felt that he was an arrow at the end of its flight. Dao Tong previously wanted to capture him, but they did not take it seriously. Later, when the three sects wanted to capture him, they took it seriously, but their strength was not enough. Now that the four sects came, he realized that he had finally met a serious opponent. That Jin Guangzi was a smart person. She was ambitious, cruel, and cautious. She was a difficult woman to deal with. It was also because of this that the limit became difficult to grasp. He was not sure how long he would have to fight like this. He was even unsure if the certain time he chose for himself was appropriate. Perhaps that Jin Guangzi had other tricks up her sleeves. She was too different from the other people of Daotong and Kenzo. She knew too many things. From the Octave Treasure's ancient scroll to the divine abilities, she seemed to be very familiar with them. Moreover, she actually had a treasure like the glazed sword heart. Li Yunxin did not know how many items, personally made by the two sages, were in Daotong and Kenzo, but just from Kun Wuzi's point of view, it seemed to be a rare and precious item. Kun Wuzi's Langya Grotto Heaven had the fog-lock toad palace. He even split it in half and gave it to the two spiritual masters under him. And the spiritual masters of the Grotto Heaven had high standards. But they also treated the incomplete treasure as a treasure. The premise of all this was that the fog-lock toad palace was not a powerful weapon of war, but something that was famous for its marvelous beauty. But Jin Guangzi's glazed sword heart was undoubtedly a terrifying killing weapon. She was a true realm sect master of a sect, and she actually had such a thing. Perhaps he could get more from her. Using the coldest and most rational way of thinking to consider a problem, this woman was indeed a surprise. But some kind of emotion that he had always suppressed was surging in his chest. Li Yunxin knew that if he released this emotion, it would be called hatred. Hatred had great power. It could turn a coward into a warrior and turn a lamb into a beast. But this thing had a huge side effect. It would make people lose a part of their rationality while gaining great courage. Should he let this emotion go? Li Yunxin glanced at the ground for a moment. Yu Meng stopped moving. He bent over and hugged the body of the servant girl named Wu Su, slightly raising his head to look at the sky. In the swirling sword light, Li Yunxin could not see his expression clearly. However, he could see Lily holding the black cat and half-crouching beside him. She used one hand to shake his arm, probably saying something like, "Young master, wake up," or "Young master, hurry and leave." The ground around them burned again. The flames and high temperature came from underground. The scorched earth around the two men would soon be affected by the flames. If he didn't escape now, he would really be burned alive. This fire was related to Li Yunxin. Previously, when Jin Guangzi thought that he was holding him back, he was also holding him back. He had originally intended to use the souls that he had bound with the iron chains to set up a formation. However, he scattered all of those vengeful spirits, turning them into resentment and pouring them into the ground. The powerful resentment sped up the activation process of the Blackstone array. Now the flames that were burning fiercely underground had already slowly seeped out of the ground. Maybe I miscalculated. Li Yunxin sighed in his heart. But it was not a big deal. He still had a backup plan. A Kenzo disciple in the transcendent state charged towards Li Yunxin with the force of wind and thunder. The two transcendent state cultivators behind him came from the left and sneaked around in the sword light. The three of them seemed to want to use the cultivator in front of them as bait for Li Yunxin to kill him. Then they would reveal the huge wound on his neck that was covered by the golden hair. Then they would sneak up on him. It was a simple and stupid tactic like children playing house. But it seemed to be the best idea that these sword cultivators could come up with in such a short period of time. These guys had been peaceful for too long. They didn't have any decent opponents. Li Yunxin sighed in his heart again. Maybe, should he wait for Yu Meng? The swordsman attacked. Li Yunxin suddenly transformed into the godly demon body. His huge body disappeared in the sky in an instant. The swordsman who was acting as bait and the two people who were about to sneak up on him were stunned when such a huge target disappeared. Just as he was in a daze. The four of them passed by each other. Then the three swordsmen turned into countless pieces of flesh and bones and fell from the sky. Li Yunxin put away the long and narrow dragon token that he used as a sword user. He suddenly turned into a dragon. His steel-scaled tail swept across and smashed a swordsman who was trying to jump to the ground into a cloud of blood mist. These small fries were not very scary. The more difficult ones were the enlightened beings. There were 3 enlightened beings. A golden light and her disciple were watching coldly from the clouds, waiting for an opportunity. One Mingzhenzi had already lost his courage and was no different from trash. The other one was also waiting for an opportunity. They were just waiting for an opportunity to risk their lives and severely injure Li Yunxin. Who knew what kind of magic potion that woman had fed these swordsmen? Didn't they usually cherish their lives the most? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, a person suddenly appeared in his field of vision, rapidly approaching him. Li Yunxin was shocked. This was a speed that only a Kenzo enlightened being could have. Did that golden light personally make a move? He immediately turned around and rushed to the sky. At the same time he fiercely spat out a thundercloud at the cultivator, wanting to block his momentum. Then he would go to the open ground and use the 9th heaven thunderfire to attack him. These swordsmen's speed was too fast. And after fighting for so long, there were no less than 10 wounds of various sizes on his body. If he fought with this enlightened being here, he would inevitably suffer more than 10 swords from these small fries. In his current state that could be considered a serious injury. Who would have thought that his plan would fail? The aggressive spiritual master actually passed through the thunderclouds without permission. It was also at this time that Li Yunxin clearly saw that person's face. When this enlightened being came, his speed was so fast that a thin layer of mist appeared in front of him, concealing his face like a comet. But now that he had passed straight through the thunderclouds, the water vapor naturally disappeared. However, the skin on his face and hands had been cracked open by the countless small snake-like lightning bolts, and then turned into huge blisters filled with blood. But he could still see. That was Mingzhenzi. What was wrong with this old bastard? Li Yunxin was greatly shocked, knowing that this Mingzhenzi was determined to seek death. And the reason why he was shocked was because this enlightened being fighting with others was one thing, but fighting with all one's strength with the will to die was another. This was like a person throwing bombs one by one, and the difference between shouting slogans and rushing into a crowd to explode. Once he knew about this, he no longer cared about the group of small fries around him. He ignored the flying swords of those 8 or 9 transformation state swordsmen piercing through the small wounds on his body, only fiercely plunging into the fire cloud, flying straight towards the west, hoping to avoid Mingzhenzi. But at this time he heard Golden Light yell, "Enlightened being Bao, stop that demon." Previously, spiritual light sword sect's enlightened being Bao had always let the disciples of his sect fight with Li Yunxin, while he himself only used all his strength when the opportunity was right, and then immediately fled regardless of whether it hit or not. Presumably he was shocked by Li Yunxin's momentum and methods of instantly killing enlightened being Chan, and didn't dare to be careless. But at this time, hearing Golden Light's words, he was actually like a loyal dog, holding his sword and rushing out from the side. He himself also turned into a bolt of lightning, piercing straight into Li Yunxin's eyes. Li Yunxin knew that this was no longer a fight, but a decisive battle. For a moment, his ferocity was aroused, and he also gathered the strength in his enormous body, shouting, "Scram!" When this rolling dragon roar came out, the sound waves and air waves actually became solid, causing the entire space in front of him to distort. But that enlightened being Bao actually didn't dodge. He allowed the Dharma robes and magic treasures on his body to be shattered by Li Yunxin's dragon roar. Then his face twisted in the violent air currents and thunderclouds, and just like Mingzhenzi behind him, he rushed over without a care for his life. Li Yunxin immediately cursed in his heart. What kind of evil technique did that golden light cultivate, causing these 2 enlightened beings to not even fear death? After he finished cursing, he heard Mingzhenzi's hoarse voice singing again, "Heaven and earth as the furnace, all things as the copper. Gold mansion as the sheath, life as the sword." Then, this Mingzhenzi, whose face had already been ravaged to the point of being terrifying, raised his hand and fiercely tapped his Baihui acupoint. His body immediately swelled up like a leather bag. The enlightened being's body was valiant and his skin was tough and tough. But now, looking at this Mingzhenzi, his facial features were all gone, and his torso and limbs couldn't be clearly distinguished. His skin, muscles and bones separated, forming a rolling circle with a bang. Then tens of thousands of rays of golden light shot out from the cracks in his skin, as if this leather ball formed from his own skin and flesh hid a terrifying energy that was ready to be released in the next moment. And at this time the same change happened to that enlightened being Bao in front of Li Yunxin. He swelled up into a circle with a bang, and then that sphere suddenly burst open. A small golden person broke out from the leather bag. But this person was neither a ghost nor a spirit. Its whole body was flowing with golden light, and it looked very much like Yang Jianzi of Qingdu. There was no sadness or joy on its face, only its two eyes were wide open, from which two long rays of golden light shot out. This strange change happened in an instant. The next moment even the small person disappeared. Only the two rays of golden light in its eyes were left spinning and intertwining, forming a thin golden sword. It stabbed straight at Li Yunxin's body from front to back. Li Yunxin knew that this thing should be extremely powerful. He didn't dare to be careless anymore. His dragon body suddenly coiled in midair, and he used his extremely hard scales to protect himself. Then he shouted sternly, "Tiger, come!" His shout shook the 9 heavens, and even the ground and the fire clouds trembled slightly. Hearing his shout, Jin Guangzi, who stood on the cloud, immediately frowned slightly. He was just waiting for this thing. But the next moment, the moment the two sword rays formed from the enlightened being's life, cultivation, and spirit stabbed at Li Yunxin's body, wonderful! An even more deafening sound rang out. In this vast world that was enveloped by the glazed sword heart, a huge figure of the same size as Sir God Wu Song appeared out of nowhere. "Good. I've finally forced you out, you ancient beast." Golden Light's slightly furrowed brows immediately relaxed. But the next moment he let out a soft huss sound. Because this thing was extremely huge and it was snow white in color. It looked like a rolling circle. It had a pair of pea-like eyes that were as black as ink, and even the pupils couldn't be seen. It was as if they were connected to the 9 levels of hell. There were 4 huge ears on its head, 1 on the right and 3 on the left, 1 white and 2 red. It was extremely strange. The beast had no mouth, and there were 3 pairs of black needle-like whiskers on its face. Each whisker was as thick as a person's arms. This beast looked strange, and it could speak human language. It was indeed an exotic beast. But to say that it was mighty and domineering. But Jin Guangzi's doubts disappeared very quickly. Once the beast appeared, it praised again, "Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful." The sound was earth-shattering, and Jin Guangzi's ears went numb. It was unknown whether it was because it was tired of being trapped in the picture scroll for a long time, or because it saw the dangerous scene of the high-level great demons fighting, and the ferocity in its heart was aroused, and thus it became excited. Then, its round body suddenly split open from the middle, as if there was an extra big mouth that could swallow the sun and the moon. It swallowed the 2 swords of light formed by the 2 enlightened beings. Jin Guangzi subconsciously held his breath. He was waiting for an earth-shattering explosion. But nothing happened. The 2 golden swords were swallowed by the ancient primitive beast, and immediately, like clay oxen entering the sea, there wasn't even the slightest sound. Then he heard Li Yunxin shout, "Withdraw." The snow-white round exotic beast immediately disappeared without a trace. It was as if the short moment it appeared was just an illusion in front of everyone. Jin Guangzi was stunned for a moment. At this moment, Li Yunxin stretched his body, and with his remaining power he killed the remaining 8 or 9 sword cultivators in an instant. Then with a shake of his body he revealed the appearance of his incarnation. It was a handsome and beautiful young man. However, this young man's white robe was already tattered, and there were a few strands of black hair scattered in front of his forehead. Half of his upper body was naked, and his well-proportioned chest was exposed. There were all kinds of small wounds on his chest, as if he had been fiercely whipped by tied thorns, and almost transparent golden blood kept oozing out. He stood in the air, and his tattered robe fluttered in the hot wind. Facing the dozens of energetic and well-organized 5 serpent sword sect cultivators on the opposite cloud alone, he actually felt a sense of desolation and solemnity. So Jin Guangzi finally let out a light breath and sneered. In the end, Li Yunxin's last resort was forced to be used. And now he was no longer using the dragon god's true body, but his incarnation, which meant his demon power was about to be exhausted. Although the dragon god's true body was stronger and faster, there wasn't much demon power left, and his movement was inevitably slow. Moreover, his body was heavily injured and he didn't have the strength to close the wounds and stop the bleeding. Thus, he revealed his incarnation. Like this, the wound on his neck that could fit in 2 houses had become a wound on his collarbone that looked like a baby's mouth. Although it was still frightening, it was much better than before. However, this also meant that he had transformed into a human and had the meridians and acupoints of a human and was ready to use Dao techniques. This is really out of my expectations. Jin Guangzi sighed and smiled, the sword of life of a true state swordsman. I didn't think it would be able to kill you, but I also thought it would be able to heavily injure you. But this is the result. In the end, you still have some skills. With a heavily injured body, you killed all the elites of the 2 Kenzo sections. This kind of glorious battle record has never been seen in the past 1,000 years. Jin Guangzi sighed and shook his head, but the more arrogant you are, the more credit I will get for killing you. You are a very good prey. If I had met you earlier, I might have kept you. But it's a pity that I can't keep you now because of the situation. After she said this, Li Yunxin laughed heroically in the strong wind. Killing you idiots is like slaughtering pigs and dogs. I can only laugh at you for thinking you are smart, but in fact you are so stupid. You don't know that the 2 so-called saints on Mount Yunshan are already fakes. The thousands of years of Daotong is now used as a knife by a bunch of Freemasons who hide their heads but show their tails. If the 2 saints of the past knew about this, they would probably come back from their coffins in anger. Ha! His laughter was filled with heroism. But after laughing for a while, he coughed and with a wave of his hand, took out 3 jade bottles out of thin air, opened the stopper and poured the contents into his mouth. But when he realized that they were empty, he threw them down without looking. Jin Guangzi listened to his words and tilted her head thoughtfully. Then she frowned and looked at him, puzzled. Freemasons? What do you mean by hiding their heads but show their tails? Am I not here? Li Yunxin was stunned and could only open his mouth. After saying this, Jin Guangzi laughed again as if she had just heard a brilliant joke from Li Yunxin, and the gold and silver hairpins on her bun swayed wildly. It's true that Daoist priests and swordsmen are stupid. This group of fools. They think they are smart. When Kuan Wuzi escaped from Mount Yunshan, they knew that there was something wrong with the 2 saints. But what did they do? They didn't do anything. What's the reason? Because they feel that the Kenzo of Daotong has been passed down for thousands of years, and it is not something that can be shaken by a few people. They also feel that even if there is something wrong with the 2 saints, they are just 2 saints. Without the 2 saints, Daotong and Kenzo are still there. So they have to plan slowly and use the 2 saints to get rid of the demons in the world. Jin Guangzi shook her head with a smile and clapped her hands sincerely. These are the words of the masters of those grotto heavens and sects in private. You can't imagine how confident they are. Their glorious history can be traced back to tens of thousands of years ago, and they don't believe that there is anything in this world that can overthrow the whole of Daotong and Kenzo. Instead, they plan to start from the bottom up and heal themselves. Oh my God. Jin Guangzi seemed to find it very funny. It's like the officials of a secular dynasty found out that the emperor was replaced. So the civil officials and generals gathered together and said, don't be afraid, the emperor is just the emperor. We should work together and find another one. If you saw how serious they were at that time, I'm afraid you would laugh even harder than me. But they didn't know that among the dozens of people gathered together, 30% are our people. Li Yunxin frowned and took a deep breath. So you are from the Freemasonry. No wonder you know so much. Then how should I address you? Which quantum? Jin Guangzi suddenly stopped and the smile on her face disappeared. The cultivators behind her were also calm. It was as if they already knew about this or they didn't hear anything. The female cultivator stared straight at Li Yunxin for a long time and then said, Are you done? Li Yunxin was slightly stunned. What did you say, Your Excellency? I say, I purposely left so much time for you to adjust your breathing and recover your spiritual power. Then I gave you time to activate the magic treasure Misty Lock Toad Palace. Now I ask you, are you done? Are you ready to escape from this glazed sword hard array? Li Yunxin's eyelids twitched. He stared at Jin Guangzi for a while, then slowly straightened his body and slightly turned his face. I don't understand what you're saying. Jin Guangzi expressionlessly raised her hand and pointed at his left sleeve. I think that treasure is in your left sleeve. And you, before I set up the glazed sword heart array, you had already set up the Misty Lock Toad Palace. After all, that treasure is known for its agility and speed, and can imperceptibly make people fall into an illusion. It should be when you and I were fighting against that black cat demon. And you fought bravely before and wholeheartedly protected those people on the ground. Not only for their safety but also for me to think that you really care about them, and then, let me tease you like a cat playing with a mouse so that you have enough time and space. In this way you can exterminate those two sects while I'm watching. This way, since you can hide the feelings in your heart and also lure them into the trap, why not? This is also your usual method, to make people think that you're using people's hearts. In fact, you're just using this method to not let people know that you care about that thing a lot. Then, at this time, when you really can't hold on anymore, you'll use this misty lock toad palace to escape. Jin Guangzi lightly exhaled and said with a bored N sound, this kind of strategy can be used to deal with those Daotong Kenzo idiots. But you and I are both smart people. Using it to deal with me, isn't it looking down on people? Li Yunxin, what you don't know is, my azure glaze sword heart is specially used to break your misty lock toad palace. Once the azure glaze is formed, the sword heart will be illuminated and all illusions in the world will be broken. Try it now. Can that toad palace of yours still be used? Li Yunxin was silent for a while and flipped his left sleeve. Thus, a ball of faint golden mist appeared in his hand. There was also a small bright moon supported by the clouds, emitting resplendent rays of light. He turned his head slightly and looked at the bright moon. Then he was silent for a while and kept it back. After a long time. Good. Li Yunxin laughed coldly. After dealing with the Daotong Kenzo Freemasonry for so many days, I finally met a decent smart person. But you talk too much nonsense, making this old man's head hurt. Jin Guangzi looked at him calmly and a very cold smile appeared on her lips. Isn't the thing you like to do the most? The pain in the skin of the body is not pain. The pain in the depths of the soul is pain. Blast your body into pieces, blast your self-confidence and self-esteem into pieces, and then blast your spirit and soul into pieces. This is killing into pieces. While you're thinking about it, I'll shatter your illusion. Who asked you to not forget at the last moment? Jin Guangzi looked at him. Aren't these the words you said to my senior brother Qing Liangzi? Since you like to play so much, I'll return them to you now. Do you think it's fun, interesting? Li Yunxin opened his mouth again and seemed to be speechless. He was in a daze for a long time. These words, these familiar words he did say when he killed Qing Liangzi in the city of Wei. That was the first disciple of the Freemasonry he met. First he made Qing Liangzi think that he had seen through all his ideas and plans. Then he gave him one surprise after another. Finally, before he completely destroyed Qing Liangzi's soul, he told him all the details so that Qing Liangzi could understand and die in regret. These were indeed his means and his words. Do you still remember that my senior brother Qing Liangzi said that he only hurt your parents? Jin Guangzi looked at him calmly, but the smile on her lips never disappeared. He said that another divine lord killed your parents from thousands of miles away, with one blow. After a long time. That's me. Killing parents, then killing relatives and friends. Then killing that person's self-confidence and pride, and finally killing his body and soul. The world is vast, but that person has nowhere to appeal and nowhere to escape. Li Yunxin, now I understand why you like to do this kind of thing. Chapter 350. A cheerful smile finally blossomed on the face of the golden light. He said these words to Li Yunxin word by word. When she looked at his face again, all the expressions on it had disappeared, leaving only a cold-to-the-bone calmness. She raised an arm. I've given you so much time and told you so many secrets. I've been extremely benevolent to you and you should know how to be content. So now there's only one thing left. Let me blast you into pieces fair and square. The next moment, it was as calm as her tone of voice. 3 steps in front of Li Yunxin, 36 dazzling golden little swords appeared out of thin air. But these swords only remained in his sight for a short moment, as if to deliberately let Li Yunxin see clearly what he was about to face, and then fiercely blasted forward. Neither human cultivators nor demon cultivators could have the time to react. The time needed for the light to cross a distance of 3 steps was too long to be described as an instant. Just as the word "you" came out of Li Yunxin's mouth abruptly, And just before the first thought appeared in his mind, the light sword collided with the protective shield created by the two gods in the painting, Qingming, and he too. A flaming meteor-like flame immediately shot out from where Li Yunxin stood. The air along the way was torn and compressed in an instant, instantly turning into a large mass of blazing clouds shining with dense flames, marking the trajectory of the bombardment of this meteor. The airwaves set off in the air also roared and hit the ground. There, the flames that were already as tall as a person were immediately extinguished, as if the celestial beings in the sky opened their mouths wide and forcefully puffed out all the wildfires in an instant. Rumble, 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 a series of loud noises. Li Yunxin, who was sent flying in the air, plowed a 50-meter-long scorch mark on the ground in one breath, stirring up sand and stones all over the sky, and finally fell into a deep pit as large as a lake. This deep pit should have been Changji Town's. But now everything had disappeared. The terrifying force, airwaves, and high temperature produced by the collision had torn all the buildings in the small town to pieces within 3 breaths, and then burned them into ashes within 3 breaths. At the bottom of the several meters deep pit, Li Yunxin's entire body was ablaze with flames. It took a full 3 breaths of time for the flames to dissipate. When she saw him again, his hair was disheveled and hanging down messily. There were even wisps of green smoke rising from his hair. It was hard to imagine what kind of terrifying baptism he had undergone. The white robe he was wearing was even more tattered. Rather than saying it was a white robe, it was more like a tattered cloth that could barely cover his body. Underneath, his strong and muscular body was revealed. His body had already turned into a dazzling golden color, and not a single part of his skin was left unscathed. Looking further out, he could see 2 faint rays of golden light, which were barely recognizable as human figures, circling around him. However, it was also slowly dimming as if it could not hold on for much longer. He stood in the pit like a metal statue, and only after a long time did he let out his first breath. With this breath, countless smaller wounds appeared on his body. However, there was no blood flowing out of the wounds, as if they had all been drained. Then, like an old machine that had rusted for a long time in the wind and frost, he slowly and painfully raised his head to look at the golden light in the sky. The Kenzoist nun was still perched on top of the cloud, and the cloud was pressing down. She and the 36 sword cultivator disciples behind her looked at him from above the cloud, and with the strange light in the sky, they looked like a majestic deity. Good move. It is indeed the treasure of the sage. Li Yunxin spat out the bloody foam that was mixed with broken internal organs. It's better to die in your hands than to die in the hands of those stupid Daoists. The golden light with a blurry face smiled slightly. There is no need for this kind of pretense. Who are you acting for? You are obviously regretful to death, but you still want to show such a heroic and open-minded attitude. You and I are both smart people, how can I not know what you are thinking in your heart? You think that if you die so heroically, after I kill you I will have some feelings of appreciation, and then disappointment? I am not those stupid Daotong Kenzo idiots, so naturally I will not think that way, and it will greatly reduce the happiness in my heart. The golden light let out a sigh of relief and closed her eyes slightly, as if she was experiencing this moment of absolute happiness. But Li Yunxin said in a low voice, "So I have made a mistake." His voice was very hoarse, as if there was a leak in his throat. But the magical power of the golden light allowed her to hear Li Yunxin's words. So she opened her eyes. "You have made too many mistakes. Which one are you talking about?" Li Yunxin took a step forward. The golden blood on his body spilled on the ground, and a green smoke rose up. "Now it seems that it is not effortless for you to use this golden glaze light sword. Also used resentment." The golden light smiled happily. And then, "So you brought a group of minions to die and asked me to kill them first. The spiritual energy in the body of a cultivator is not comparable to that of a mortal. I have killed enough. You used resentment as a primer and then triggered the sword array." Li Yunxin squinted his eyes slightly and raised his head. "I also used this method in City of Wei. Why didn't I think of it?" The golden light raised her eyebrows regretfully. "Yes. What you said is all true. What I can tell you is, I am now talking nonsense with you because I am also adjusting my breath so that I can launch the next attack to kill you. And I also know." She raised her hand and waved it in the air. You transformed into a Shinryu body and did some other things in the sky. They were fighting with you and did not pay attention. But I saw it clearly from the side. When the flying sword of the Kenzo came to kill you, you either dodged or counterattacked and there was a burst of light around you. You took advantage of the burst of light to draw an array in the sky with the golden light. You are indeed a brilliant painting Daoist. You can actually set up an array in such a dangerous environment, in such a chaotic flow of spiritual energy. But it is still the same mistake. The golden light shrugged. Don't think of me as stupid as those people in Daotong and Kenzo. I have practiced Kendo for 100 years, and I know very well what the golden light of the Kenzo's sword looks like. You and I are both people who pay attention to details. You can't hide it from me. I told you to kill cultivators with resentment, didn't you? The array you set up in the sky also needs resentment as a primer, right? But your array is too slow. The golden light sneered. You can't be faster than the flowing light. Finally, after she said this, Li Yunxin's body seemed to be pulled out of something. Before he was injured badly, but after all his body was still upright and he still had some heroic spirit at the end of his life. But at this time his body became exhausted. The heroic spirit on his face slowly disappeared and finally became completely calm. It was a kind of calmness that lost vitality. He couldn't help but take a step back and finally sat on the ground, putting his arms on his knees. He lowered his head, smelling the burnt smell on the ground, the slight fishy smell of blood, and the air being bombarded by the extremely high temperature and lightning, the familiar, fresh ozone smell. Then he raised his head, looked at the sky blankly and waved his hand blankly. Then the sky lit up. Above the vast sky, nodes were lit up one after another. These bright light spots were like stars, and they were connected by even finer and more dazzling lines of light, forming a huge picture that covered the sky. It seemed like a painting of a general in armor charging and killing enemies like a forest of swords and spears. Looking at it, it looked like a star palace in the sky. Guangwang Formation Breaking Diagram. Li Yunxin squinted his eyes and said expressionlessly, I used this diagram when I killed Qingzhu. I originally planned to use the resentful spirit aura in the formation to find the weak point of the glazed sword heart formation, and then launch an all-out attack to break the formation. He was silent for a while and laughed at himself, but I overestimated myself. After all, it's the formation of a sage and it's a little better than my formation cultivation. A little. Huh. Golden Light laughed mockingly. You really overestimated yourself. So, since it has come to this, Li Yunxin sighed, can you tell me who the Freemasonry is? What do you want to do? And what's with your Daoist name? Golden Light smiled slightly. I can't. But I'm happy to see you like this. She raised her hand. Then let's get down to business. There are 3 little fellows. I'll give you a question to solve. That man, the little maid beside him, and your little cat demon. Among these 3, which one do you feel the most uncomfortable if I kill first? Li Yunxin slowly turned his head and looked to the side. After looking for a while he found Yu Meng and the other 2. Yu Meng wore a lake blue robe with white edges. But in the sky full of fire, the robe became light purple. When Li Yunxin last saw him he was holding Wu Su's corpse and kneeling on the ground like a statue. Until now he was still half kneeling, but to protect someone. It seemed to be to resist the airwave caused by Li Yunxin being struck down from the sky. He was not very far from Li Yunxin, about 100 meters away. At this distance, Li Yunxin could clearly see his face, but as a mortal he could only see a blurry black shadow shrouded in smoke when he looked at Li Yunxin. After Li Yunxin glanced at him, Yu Meng moved. Therefore a layer of sand and dust fell from his body. He slowly opened his arms and placed Wu Su, who was protected in his embrace, on the ground. Then he struggled to get up, slowly walked 3 to 4 steps and used his hands to lift up half of the burnt beam. Then he heard a soft moan of a woman. Then Li Yunxin saw Yu Meng push away the dirt under the beam and pull Lily out. At this distance, Li Yunxin saw Lily's face was pale, and there were traces of dark red liquid on her body. He did not know what hurt her. But that little girl's skills were at the level of a second-rate warrior in Jianghu. Now she had her eyes closed and could not move, and could only let out unconscious moans. She was probably going to die soon. He took a closer look. Lily was holding a furry black ball in her arms, and it seemed to have a weak breath. Yu Meng straightened up. He stood there in a daze for a while, then turned his head. He first looked in the direction of Li Yunxin. At this distance, mortals should not be able to see clearly. But Li Yunxin had an illusion that Yu Meng was staring at his face. Then Yu Meng raised his head, squinted his eyes and looked at the sky again. Li Yunxin realized he was looking in the direction of Jin Guangwen. The fight continued for a long time. The sky had long brightened. Not sure if it was because the temperature of the flames had dropped, or because the air waves from the fight had rushed to the sky. The fire clouds, which were originally tightly covering the sky, and even the sun and moon, suddenly split open. Then the bright sunlight shone down from the sky like a sharp sword, directly onto Yu Meng. Even Jin Guangwen let out a soft huh at this strange scene. But then she looked at Li Yunxin, shook her head slightly and laughed coldly. "Don't waste your effort." "I don't want to waste my effort. Since you don't want to choose, then kill them all." After saying this, she stared at Li Yunxin, not letting go of any changes in his expression, and casually waved her hand. 3 rays of golden light immediately formed above the heads of the 2 mortals and the demon. Just like when they killed Wu Su, it hung above their heads 2 fists high without the slightest tremble. This was the power of the ancient sages, which came from the dust of history in prehistoric times. It did not care about the mortals' thoughts, only silently and brightly shining, cold and cruel. And Yu Meng slowly raised his hand just like before. He still wanted to use his hand to touch this small sword, as if he had forgotten what happened the last time he touched this thing. Jin Guangwen in the cloud lightly pressed her finger. Then she silently looked at Li Yunxin and said, "Now it's your turn." But then she realized that the eyes of Li Yunxin, who was about to die in her hands, the originally lifeless and silent Li Yunxin, slightly lit up. He wasn't even looking at her but at the 2 mortals. An indescribable feeling suddenly appeared in Jin Guangwen's heart. She immediately turned her head. She saw a scene that shocked her speechless. That was Yu Meng with 2 fingers stained with sand and dust. He pinched the light sword that should have pierced through them from head to toe. Jin Guangwen uttered a short syllable. Just then she saw Yu Meng take down the light sword, as if it had a material form, and then crushed it. The light sword scattered into specks of light, like countless fireflies. They scattered in all directions in the air, quickly disappearing without a trace. Only Gold Photon knew how much energy was contained in this tiny lightsaber. Then Yu Meng walked to Lily's side. He reached out his hand again and used his thumb and index finger to pinch the small sword on Lily's head. Then he used his middle and ring fingers to pinch the sword on Black Cat's head. With a little more force, the 2 swords also turned into bright spots of light and dissipated. Jin Guangwen was shocked. She immediately used all her strength to activate the formation, but it wasn't aimed at Li Yunxin. Instead, it was aimed at the mortal she had always ignored. She used all her strength. But nothing happened. She couldn't activate the light sword. Only then did Yu Meng stand silently and let out a low sigh. Then he turned to look at Li Yunxin. "Can you still use your Guang Wang formation breaking diagram?" Li Yunxin took a deep breath, supported his body and stood up. "I can only hit it once." "Hit there." Yu Meng raised his hand and pointed at the 36 disciples behind Jin Guangwen. "Hurry up." As soon as his voice fell, the huge picture scroll that Li Yunxin cast in the sky suddenly moved. The huge humanoid Guang Wang, made of bright spots of light, immediately transformed into an even more dazzling starry lance, shooting straight at the 36 sword cultivators behind Jin Guangwen. Jin Guangwen let out a scream. She waved her big sleeves and immediately urged the cloud to fly high into the sky. At the same time, 3 magic weapons shot out from her sleeves in an attempt to block Li Yunxin's final attack. At this moment, Yu Meng, who was standing on the scorched black ground, suddenly shouted in the vast wilderness with green smoke. "Evil creature! Who do you think I am?" His shout didn't shake the 9 heavens like cultivators and demons. High up in the sky, it sounded like the faint sound of a human voice. But it was this indistinct human voice that immediately caused the 36 people behind Jin Guangyue to panic. Previously they were standing properly and were no different from humans. But now, after hearing Yu Meng's voice, their appearance immediately changed. It was as if the human shape was burned by the high temperature. In the blink of an eye, the 36 people changed their appearance. They turned into 36 big red birds with strange appearances. Once these big birds showed their appearance, they were like startled sparrows flying around aimlessly. When they flew away from Jin Guangwen's back, there were only 36 wooden puppets left on the cloud. Jin Guangwen panicked and loudly chanted some spell, but those strange birds didn't pay attention to her spell. They hovered in the sky for a while and then swarmed toward Yu Meng on the ground. At this moment, the lance transformed by Guang Wang from Li Yunxin's Guang Wang breaks the formation, hit the puppets behind Jin Guangwen with a loud bang. The fragments of the puppets exploded and Jin Guangwen also spat out a mouthful of blood. It was as if her body was hiding a huge bag full of blood, and at this moment, it received an indescribably violent impact and all the blood was spilled out. She spat out this mouthful of blood for more than 10 breaths of time, and even her plump skin quickly withered and shriveled. Li Yunxin knew what was going on. A cultivator had been cultivating with an extremely powerful magic weapon all year round. But now that magic weapon seemed to have suddenly, not even destroyed, but taken away. This would bring unimaginable damage to her. In extreme shock, he held his breath and looked at Yu Meng again. Yu Meng was still quietly standing on the ground with one hand behind his back. The strange birds that came crashing down from the sky circled timidly around him for a while. Then Yu Meng raised his right hand. Then, as if they had found their master, the strange birds rushed into his hand with a bang, and turned into a round, shining, transparent glass. In the sky, the golden photon was like a bird with broken wings, swaying and unable to stabilize its body. The fiery cloud under her feet gathered and scattered and gathered again. It seemed like she really wanted to fly away on the cloud, but she couldn't gather any spiritual energy. After waiting for a full 15 minutes, she finally stood firm and looked down from the cloud. Yu Meng also looked up while dragging the crystal sword core. Jin Guangwen looked at him for 3 breaths of time, then suddenly turned to Li Yunxin. Good. Li Yunxin. You really have a good plan, good courage. Jin Guangwen. After saying this, she spat out another mouthful of blood. Jin Guangwen. Will do what I say. I will temporarily put your head on your neck. Li Yunxin suddenly sneered, flew into the sky and shouted, I won't keep your head. Seeing that he still had energy to fly, Jin Guangwen didn't say anything else, turned around and flew away on the fiery cloud. In just a few breaths of time she disappeared into the horizon. Li Yunxin stood in the sky for another 3 breaths of time, then fell straight down, right behind Yu Meng, smashing a large cloud of dust. But Yu Meng didn't look at him, still slightly raised her head, looking at the direction Jin Guangwen flew. After watching for a while, she softly said, Promise me one thing. Li Yunxin's chest was heaving up and down. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes. Say it. Yu Meng lowered her head, looking at him seriously. Kill her. Grind her bones and scatter her ashes. She and I also have a grudge against each other for killing our parents. Li Yunxin took a deep breath. We can't live under the same sky. I don't need you to say it. But who the hell are you? Yu Meng was silent for a long time. Then she turned around, walked to Lily, squatted down, lifted her up and looked at her for a while. I used to be a Kenzo. The 213th Kenzo. But now I'm Yu Meng. Chapter 351. He uttered these words in earnest. Then he lowered his head again and reached out to touch Lily's face. Li Yunxin lay flat on the ground and stared at the sky for a while. The crack in the sky had already closed up. It was like dusk again. A hot and suffocating wind blew over the scorched plains. It really did look like a battlefield. After a long time, Li Yunxin turned his head. His gaze passed over the scorched soil, torn ribbons, ashen white ashes, and the small pool of blood formed by the blood flowing from Lily's wrist. He saw Yu Meng's face. Then he was slightly taken aback. At first he thought he would be calm or at the very least he would look different from mortals. But his face was filled with clear and intense grief, like a young man who had lost someone he loved. This really didn't seem like the person he claimed to be. But the piece of glazed sword heart in his hand was absolutely real. Li Yunxin stared at him for a while and said, If you're a sword saint, why didn't you chase after them? If you're a sword saint, why did you help me? Then he raised his hand with difficulty and pointed at Lily. I'm afraid this little girl won't live for long. If you're a sword saint, why didn't you save her? Yu Meng touched Lily's face again and shook his head gently. Her meridians are all broken. There's no doctor in the world who can cure her. I'm not the sword saint of today. He raised his head to look at Li Yunxin. His eyes were misty and his voice trembled slightly. I saw the metal chain you used when you came. You're a young world judge, right? Wu Su and Lily's souls should still be with them. I want you to seal their souls so they won't be harmed. If Black Bai Yanjun comes later, I want you to seal their souls. Tell them on my behalf that Sword Saint Pei Yunjin wants a favor from them. Sword Saint Pei Yunjin, Sword Saint Pei Yunjin. Li Yunxin softly repeated the name twice. He slowly propped himself up and sat up. The 213th Sword Saint. So you're not the Sword Saint of today? The current Sword Saint is the 214th generation. Li Yunxin thought for a moment and said, all right. If those two really come, I am waiting for them too, you know. But He sighed softly as he slowly got up. There was not a single part of his body that did not hurt. In fact, every inch of his skin had been torn apart. Now his ocean of qi and mountain of snow was almost dried up, and the remaining spiritual qi was barely squeezed out. However, if this Sword Saint Pei Yunjin wasn't a fake, then this place could still be considered safe. Even if the people of Daotong and Kenzo did not recognize him, based on his ability to catch the golden sword with his bare hands, no one would be able to do anything to him, as long as this guy did not attack him. Li Yunxin slowly moved to the side of Wu Su's corpse and took out a talisman from his bosom. He took a drop of his saliva and placed it on her forehead. Slowly he moved to Yu Meng's side, took out the same talisman and stuck it on his body. Yu Meng looked at the talisman and frowned slightly. Evil suppressing talisman. Why did you seal this? Li Yunxin was silent for a while and sighed helplessly. Lord Sword Saint, you better prepare yourself. Those two bastards, they haven't appeared for a long time. I am Yu Meng. Yu Meng looked at Wu Su and Lily, then at him. Two bastards? Who are you referring to? He was startled and seemed to realize that the bastards Li Yunxin was referring to was Black Bai Yanjun. How dare he say that? You saw it too. When I came here, I had a long string of them in my hand. Other than using it to create a formation, it was also to lure them out. So many souls were tied up by me, but I didn't send them down. They should come and see what's going on, right? Li Yunxin frowned, but they really didn't come. Up until now. He has not come even after 15 minutes. Maybe something happened. He hesitated for a while and carefully looked at Yu Meng's expression. But I can help them change their bodies. But I can't for the time being. Take it. Yu Meng suddenly raised his hand and threw the magic treasure in his palm, the glazed sword heart, to Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin was shocked and hesitated for a while before catching it. He almost dropped the treasure on the ground. What did Yu Meng mean by this? Just like that, he gave him such a treasure? He was a little confused about the current situation. Yu Meng was the Sword Saint, one of the previous leaders of the human world, one of the two leaders of the orthodox Xian men and one of the archenemies of the demons. And he was a great demon. Just now in front of him, killed so many disciples of the Kenzo. They were all his disciples and grand disciples. Their positions should be opposing each other. But Yu Meng was emotionally, the golden light of the Kenzo killed his maid. And from his behavior, he seemed to care a lot about that maidservant. However, sages, didn't they abandon all emotions and desires and forget all emotions? The reason why Li Yunxin was surprised was because he saw the strong emotions of Immortal on his face. It was not an emotion that a cultivator in the transcendent state should have. So, what do you mean? Li Yunxin held the glazed sword heart in his hand and frowned. I am a demon. Yu Meng smiled, but his smile was a bit sad. So what? Here's your recompense if you say you can really do it. You are the Sword Saint. Li Yunxin looked at him. I just killed many of your disciples and grand disciples. And you want me to kill the golden light, because of these two mortals? I don't like it. Why don't you do it yourself? Because I can't. He raised his hand and handed it to Li Yunxin. I can't cultivate. I don't want to be the Sword Saint anymore. I just want to be immortal in this life. Li Yunxin looked at him suspiciously. After he was sure that Yu Meng had no other intentions, he put 2 fingers on Yu Meng's pulse. Then he pulled back. What Yu Meng said was true. There was no ocean of qi and mountain of snow in his body. There weren't even any meridians or acupoints. Instead, it was a vast, chaotic mess. This kind of body was unique in cultivating martial arts in the mortal world, because to a certain extent he was born with the conception and governing vessels. But to cultivate Dao, he didn't even have the ocean of qi and mountain of snow. How could he have any spiritual power? But you, why did you take her glazed sword heart? Li Yunxin asked as he looked into the distance. The fire was still burning, but he didn't feel safe anymore. Damn it. If this sword saint really didn't have any divine power and couldn't cultivate Dao, if the golden light or someone else came back, they would all be dead. Glazed sword heart. Glazed sword heart. Yu Meng repeated the name twice and shook his head. What glazed sword heart? It's just 36 ghosts. At that time, there were countless ghosts and monsters in the world. Among them there were 36 ghost kings. Their cultivation and divine power were not inferior to your 9 dragon son. I spent 146 years capturing them one by one, then refining them into these 36 gold crows. This so-called glazed sword heart is just a prison to imprison them. At that time I used it as a magic weapon. Let's not talk about it. But they still know the smell of my spirit. My spirit. Yu Meng paused and suddenly looked up at Li Yunxin. You still don't know anything, do you? Li Yunxin was stunned. What do you mean? Yu Meng's expression suddenly became serious. Although he couldn't hide the sadness on his face, at least he looked different from ordinary people. He looked cautious and cautious. He first pointed to the ground, this array. Then he pointed to the sky, and the celestial beings. Li Yunxin took a deep breath. I'd like to hear more. Yu Meng looked at him for a while, then bent down to pick up Lily. Let's leave here first. If the golden crows are from the Freemasonry, they will come back soon. Li Yunxin was stunned again. You also know about the Freemasonry? What you know now is just a corner of the truth of this world. Yu Meng smiled sadly, and you will soon regret letting yourself know more. Yi Country. Biling Road. Little Rock Canyon. Yi Country was to the north of Qing Kingdom. At this point the autumn had become even more intense. Little Rock Canyon was also one of the famous cities in the world. But its fame didn't lie in the prosperity of the market or the height of the city wall, but in the ginkgo trees all over the city. Ginkgo trees were planted on the streets of all sizes in the city. Now that it was autumn, the leaves were brilliant golden, as if the whole city was floating with gold leaf. In a good season, the sun shone down from the sky, making the yellow leaves look slightly bright and translucent. It was a beautiful scene rarely seen anywhere else. And the Little Rock in the name of the city came from the Little Rock Mountain in the city. In fact, this was a mountain city. Half of the city was on the plains at the foot of the mountain, and the other half was built on a small mountain. It was said that this small mountain was a complete boulder. And this boulder was a fragment of a larger boulder that fell from the sky a long time ago, so it was called Little Rock. But at this moment, Li Yunxin stood in the pavilion at the highest point of the mountain and looked down. He felt that the size of Little Rock Canyon was not much smaller than the city of Wei. Calling it Little Rock Mountain was too much of an injustice. I have been here once. At that time this was only a small town at the foot of the mountain. The mountain was also higher than it is now. Yu Meng sat upright in the pavilion, leaning against the armrest. His gaze passed over Li Yunxin and looked further south. Little Rock Canyon was on Biling Road in Yi Country, more than 600 li from the border between the two countries. But even so far away he could still see an ominous gray line on the southern horizon. It was the dust cloud that had been burned by the flames within the Qing Kingdom. The wooden pavilion they were sitting in was built on the top of a small rock mountain in the city. This mountain was relatively flat. Not only was there a pavilion, but there were also academies, inns, guilds, tea houses and so on. It was a good place for the city's literati to climb high and look into the distance, discuss poetry and meet friends. But today it was very quiet. It was said that the mountain gate of the Wuyu sword sect, which was located 300 miles away from the city, had sent a notice, asking the surrounding cities to offer some miscellaneous but strange things. Although this was not an order from the government, it was far more effective than the government's order. Because of this, all the influential people in the city gathered in the magistrate's office to discuss this matter. Even those scholars who spent their days writing and reciting poems for fun were busy. Because it was also said that the Wuji sword sect was about to open its mountain gate. The immortals in the mountain wanted to accept disciples. So at this time, when the afternoon sun shone lazily on the slightly yellow grass, there were only the two of them in the pavilion. That was the last year of my life. Yumeng thought for a while, lost in thought. He looked like an old man. Sitting in the pavilion, wrapped in a golden fox fur coat, he exhaled a faint white mist from his mouth as he reminisced about the past. I traveled the world intending to take one last look at the world. I practiced in Yunshan for 1,640 years, probably the longest and most strenuous of all the saints in history. He narrowed his eyes slightly and paused. But when I really saw the world, I felt that there was nothing left to live for. Mountains are not mountains and water is not water. The people in the secular world are no different from grass and trees. I really don't know what there is to stay in this world. Li Yunxin stood on the other side of the pavilion and thought for a while. Didn't the two saints of today cultivate for more than 3,000 years? Yumeng did not look at him, still squinting into the distance. Are you talking about the real 214th generation of sword saints and the 259th generation of calligraphers? They were the most talented of all the saints in history. They probably only cultivated for more than 1,100 years. But they had already reached the realm of ascension. Li Yunxin frowned slightly and tried to sort out the timeline. When Lord Dongting brought him to Red Flower City for the first time, he told him a story. 3,000 years ago, Lord Dongting was still a red fish. He met a female Taoist priest who held a red flower by the river, so he was enlightened. And that female Taoist priest was the current sword saint. This meant, if what Yumeng said was true, if Yumeng was really the previous sword saint, when he was a saint, he watched the current sword saint and calligraphers slowly cultivate and grow. Li Yunxin suddenly felt a strong sense of absurdity in her heart. This feeling was even greater than the feeling of coming from one world to another. Many things in the past had become history and legends. But now, if it was true, then the person sitting in front of him was not only a history and legend, but also a person who had witnessed another history and legend. He felt a little dizzy. He didn't know if it was because of his heavy injuries or his chaotic thoughts. I decided to ascend. Yumeng thought for a while, rubbed his hands and breathed into his palms. Like a mortal who was afraid of the cold. Do you know what ascension is? No. At this time, a peddler came over with a rattan basket to sell dried fruits and candied fruits. Yumeng gave her a piece of silver in exchange for 2 small boxes. The peddler thanked him profusely and left. Yumeng opened the small box and took a small piece of persimmon. There was a layer of frost on the persimmon. He stared at the frost and showed a puzzled expression that did not match his status as a saint. He didn't put it into his mouth. Li Yunxin thought for a while and realized, Wuxia and Lily must have made this for him in the past. Of course, the 2 girls would wipe off the frost on the persimmon. He sighed in his heart. This is the condensation of glucose and fructose. Eat it. Yumeng looked at him, then at the persimmon. After a moment of hesitation, he put it into his mouth. After chewing for a while, he said, "It's better to wipe it off." Li Yunxin shrugged. Tisk. Then he suddenly asked, "What color is the egg?" Yumeng frowned slightly. "Why are you asking this? Isn't it white?" "Soft and white." Yumeng thought for a while. "Is there a hard one?" Li Yunxin tilted his head. "Please continue." Yumeng looked at him strangely, then pushed the persimmon in the box to the side. He picked up a peeled pumpkin seed and put it into his mouth, saying, "You can actually ascend if you cultivate to the supreme indifference. I used to think that ascension is, when your cultivation level is high enough, you can suddenly move your mind and ascend to the celestial realm. But after I cultivated to the supreme indifference, I realized that this matter is not something that you can leave just because you want to. It's more like, you have to wait." Yumeng squinted his eyes. "Wait for a vacancy in the celestial realm. Wait for the celestial realm to summon you and you cultivated to the supreme indifference, then you can ascend." Speaking up to here, he lowered his head to look at the dried fruits and candied fruits in the box. Hearing this, Li Yunxin was anxious, but he couldn't urge him. He could only frown and look at him, regretting that he didn't buy a box just now. Yumeng searched for a while, then sighed. He closed the box and casually threw it to the side. He exhaled a white breath into his hand, then continued, I waited for 120 years. During this period, I always thought that there was a problem with my cultivation. I thought about it over and over again, but after thinking for a long time one night, I was meditating on Cloud Mountain when I suddenly felt that I had fallen into the clouds. That feeling was as if I had been separated from the world and went to another world. Then someone asked me, are you ready to ascend to the celestial realm? As soon as I thought about it, I knew that it wasn't a mortal or a cultivator. There was no one in this world who could make me fall into that kind of situation without knowing it. At that time I was already in the supreme indifference. When I encountered this, I didn't feel the slightest bit of emotion in my heart. I only knew that I was ready. Then I heard that voice say to me, then come. Yumeng paused for a long time. Then it was time to pass the tribulation. Passing the tribulation was naturally very difficult. It wasn't only limited to withstanding the heavenly thunder, but also all kinds of astral winds in the heaven realm. Only then did I understand why it couldn't be a cultivator's thought that could pass the tribulation. Because if I passed the tribulation on Cloud Mountain, everyone below the level of a sage would die in an instant. You can't imagine how terrifying the heavenly thunder and tribulation wind are. Even with my supreme indifference and more than 1,600 years of cultivation, I only lasted for a quarter of an hour. Xianxia thought for a while. You failed? I failed. But didn't the celestial guide you? Xianxia asked in surprise. You can also fail this kind of thing? Yumenglu smiled. He shook his head slightly and reached out his hand as he said, that's why the celestial who talked to me was also very strange. At this point he looked to the side, then put down his hand. He exhaled lightly and continued, the celestial was also very strange. Then, it seemed that the celestial who guided me also encountered the heavenly thunder and tribulation wind because I failed the tribulation. As a result, I didn't ascend to the celestial realm, but the celestial fell to our mortal world. Think about it, who was that celestial? The old Xian in your head? Yes, it was that old Xian. Then my cultivation and divine abilities were all gone. The celestial said that before he ascended to become a celestial, his name in the mortal world was Shenmu. This Shenmu, because I failed the tribulation, he fused with my spirit and couldn't be separated. I wasn't on Cloud Mountain when I passed the tribulation. So, after that, I planned to return to Kenzo and return to Cloud Mountain to cultivate again. But at that time that Shenmu told me about the Freemasonry. Xianxia immediately pricked up his ears and listened attentively. At the same time he glanced around. The peddler who had been selling the dried fruits and candied fruits of Yumeng walked around, but did not seem to be able to sell anything. He then turned back as if he wanted to ask the rich customer if he needed anything else. But Xianxia immediately glared at him from afar. Scram. The peddler was so scared that he ran away like a wisp of smoke. Yumeng turned around and looked at the peddler. He sighed and said, he told me not to go back. He told me that Daotong and Kenzo had actually died out before my generation. That didn't mean that the sects and grotto heavens were gone. But the Freemasonry ran into these sects and took control of many inconspicuous but important positions. For example, in a grotto heavens, there is a patriarch above and a few courtyards below. After that, there are a few halls and all kinds of chores. The Freemasonry might not be patriarchs, but they might be the heads of the courtyards. Or they might control the cultivation of their disciples. All these things the people above can't find out, but the people below have already become mere figureheads. The cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo cultivate to cut off their emotions and abandon their desires, so that they can forget their emotions and ascend. But the Freemasonry don't care about ascension. Although they cultivate Daoist arts and swordsmanship, they don't care about their desires. Thus, the Daoist priests and swordsmen are like numb wooden blocks in their eyes. And they are good at currying favor and scheming. Thus, Daotong and Kenzo didn't die because of the demons but because of themselves. This is also reasonable. But they only control and don't do anything else. This kind of patience that can endure for thousands of years, not impatient or impatient and slowly build up, is very scary. As for who the Freemasonry are, Shenmu said that they are celestials. Xianxia frowned, his heart skipping a beat. He tried to keep his voice calm. Celestials. Not the kind of celestials you think. Yu Meng also frowned and thought for a while. It's a group of bad celestials. This group of celestials felt that the heavenly realm was boring, so they came to the secular world, wanting to bring disaster to the world. But in this world there is still the great Tao. Celestials are omnipotent in the heavenly realm, but when they come to the secular world they lose all their magical powers. However, although these celestials lost their magical powers, they still have other things. The Daoist arts, swordsmanship, these heavenly heart techniques, weren't they originally passed down by the celestials? They lost their magical powers, but they have all the techniques of the world's 36 paradises and 72 schools. Thus, they pass these techniques to the cultivators they choose. That's why those quantum people call it dual cultivation. Li Yunxin said in a low voice. Yu Meng nodded, and this Shen Mu, it is said that he doesn't like the behavior of the celestials. Thus he wanted to take the opportunity to help me ascend to the lower realm. But he didn't expect that he would fail. He also said that the master of calligraphy, who went through the heavenly tribulation at the same time as me, had successfully ascended. This matter must have been known by the celestials of the Freemasonry. Thus, if I returned to Cloud Mountain at that time, I would definitely be caught by the people hiding there. Celestials. Li Yunxin frowned slightly. I heard that the Freemasonry has 414 elders. Are they the 414 celestials from the lower realm? What do they want to do? Just for fun? He felt that some things didn't seem to make sense. But what exactly was the problem? For a moment he couldn't tell. Shen Mu didn't say. Maybe it's because he is also a celestial. But then, I met a woman. When Yu Meng said this, his voice became soft and ethereal. He seemed to have mentioned something that he cared about very much and had rather complicated feelings. That woman. He hesitated for a while and frowned. That woman. That woman. He was originally sitting lazily against the armrest of the wooden pavilion. Now he frowned and straightened his body again. Previously he was like an old man reminiscing about the past in the autumn afternoon sun, lazy and leisurely. But now he was frowning as if he was trying hard to remember something, but he couldn't remember it no matter how hard he tried. Li Yunxin stared at him carefully for a while, then asked softly, "Is it the art saint?" Yu Meng frowned and looked up at him. What? The art saint? Yu Meng looked at him again. What did you say? Li Yunxin let out a light breath. In his heart he already understood. The same situation. Lord Dongting and the Dragon Son couldn't hear anything related to possession. And this Yu Meng. The woman he mentioned was without a doubt the art saint. But although he seemed to know the art saint and had indeed interacted with her, when the two of them first met he couldn't remember anything. Similar methods, or rather almost the same method, was used on this saint. Then possession, what did it have to do with the art saint? Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then walked in front of Yu Meng. He grabbed his shoulders with both hands, looked into his eyes and asked, "Skip this part. Let me ask you about the art saint. What do you know?" The art saint became a saint 2,000 years ago and founded a sect. At that time you should still be here. His words were like a carriage that had strayed into a narrow alley and could not move forward anymore. The expression on Yu Meng's face disappeared in an instant. He was slightly stunned for a while, then quickly blinked his eyes. Ah, yes. The art saint. About the art saint. You know that she became a saint and founded a sect 2,000 years ago, and what she cultivated was neither Tao techniques nor swordsmanship. It was the art of painting. But this art of painting, surprisingly, is similar to the divine heart. Then do you know where her art of painting came from? Li Yunxin immediately answered, I don't know. Yu Meng gently broke free from Li Yunxin's hand. He raised his hand and pointed at his head. It was the celestial in my head who customized that set of art Tao for the art saint. That was why she could become a saint within 200 years. Shen Mu, since he could not be separated from me, he purposely wanted the art saint to compete with the Freemasons. The art saint was also an extremely proud woman, and had a lively personality, so the two of them hit it off well. Yu Meng was silent for a while after saying all this, then used his hand to lightly pat his knee. What a pity. In the end he could not defeat them. Not only did the art saint perish. Even the sword saint and calligraphy saint of this generation also perished. Li Yunxin was shocked and took a step back. You are referring to the matter of the art saint becoming a demon 1,000 years ago? The matter of the world besieging the art saint? It was the Freemasons' world long ago. Yu Meng shook his head. The two saints led Dao Tong and Kenzo to besiege the art saint. In the end they knew the truth. So what? In the end they all died. My identity was also exposed and there was no way to escape. The only way was to reincarnate. Yu Meng raised his head and looked towards the south. Before reincarnating, Shen Mu set up that star formation in Xianxia town. It was a formation that I had never seen before. It was also his own creation. I once suspected that Shen Mu was of the evil path. But he created the art Dao and used such a formation. Other than a celestial, who else could have such a thorough understanding of the Dao of heaven and earth? That star formation had no other use. It only helped me recover some of my memories. Yu Meng sighed miserably. After reincarnating, I still could not separate from that Shen Mu. I was born to know. I also knew that I was different, so I wanted to understand my background. Step by step, I found my way here. And the result? Now, I would rather never have gone to Xianxia town. I would rather be with the two of them and not care about the disputes of the world. I would find a place with beautiful scenery and spend the rest of my life. After I die, I would reincarnate and become a secular person who knows nothing. Li Yunxin was silent. After a while, he raised his head and looked at the golden ginkgo trees in the distance and said, "You have experienced the taste of Taishang Wang Qing before, and now you still want to be a secular person?" Yu Meng smiled. "It is because I experienced the taste of Taishang Wang Qing that I want to be a secular person. Don't you know?" Li Yunxin opened his mouth and frowned. Then he smiled and said, "Maybe." Then the two sat facing each other in the wooden pavilion on the peak of the mountain. There were few people here and it was very quiet. The autumn wind blew through the row of ginkgo trees beside the pavilion, and the golden leaves rustled, sending some fallen leaves on the green stone floor of the pavilion. Li Yunxin put his hands on his knees. Seeing the leaves come to his feet, he stretched out a finger and gently drew a circle. So the leaves on the ground were rolled up by the small whirlwind, and also gently drew circles. After teasing for a while, Li Yunxin raised his head and looked at Yu Meng. "It rained when you were 10. I don't know who struck that thunder." Yu Meng also looked at the circling leaves at his feet. "I didn't know anything at that time." "Don't ask me, Shen Mu. You used the vengeful souls to activate the star formation. As soon as the formation was completed, he had already left. I don't know where to go and I don't know how to go. Now I am just immortal." Li Yunxin flicked his finger. The leaves that were spinning in circles flew out with a crashing sound. "But you showed up in Xianxia town. Jin Guangzi remembered you. He probably thought that I was the one who solved the trap, but she still remembered you. It's not realistic for you to live in seclusion." Yu Meng looked at him seriously. "So kill her. I have observed that woman's character. She probably won't easily tell others about the fiasco. Even if she did, she wouldn't say it in detail. You have to kill her as soon as possible so that I can live in peace. She must die." Li Yunxin stood up and paced a few steps in the pavilion. "But the things you said, all the things you said, have you ever doubted whether they are true or not?" Yu Meng smiled. "These things sound reasonable. As for whether they are true or not, I don't care anymore. Whether they are true or not is something that will happen in hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years. By that time I will already be dead. Why should I care? I wasted 1,600 years to cultivate myself from a human to a ghost. Another 1,000 years to run around for something that is destined to fail. In this life, my understanding of people and feelings are the most wonderful things in this world." Yu Meng looked at Li Yunxin. "Kill Jin Guangzi. Save Wu Su and Lily. Help me find a stable place to hide from the world. I will tell you all the secrets of Taoism that I have learned in the 1,400 years as a saint." Li Yunxin put his hands behind his back and walked a few steps with his head down. He turned to look at him. "Sounds good. But I have to solve the trap in front of me first. Someone plotted against me and wanted to kill me." He laughed coldly. "I have lived here for more than 10 years. This is the second time I am in such a difficult situation, and both times it was done by the same group of people. If I don't vent my anger, I won't be able to think straight. Now I can finally breathe and it's time to let them know their regret." Why don't you help me first, kill a few people's families, destroy a few people's families, then do your thing? What do you think? Chapter 352. Yu Meng thought for a while and said, I took the glazed sword heart of gold photon by luck. If she had used other treasures we might have all died there. I don't have any supernatural power but I can remember some things. How do you want me to help you? Li Yunxin didn't say anything. Instead he walked 2 steps to Yu Meng and grabbed his hand. Yu Meng's hand was an ordinary young man's hand. Maybe it was because he was a sword saint in his previous life and was talented with the sword, but there were almost no calluses on his palm. Li Yunxin scratched the back of Yu Meng's hand with his fingernail, leaving a faint white mark. The people in the mortal world can't hurt you. He put down Yu Meng's hand and said, your martial arts are good. But if you want to help me you can help me sneak into the 5 Ghost Sword sect. Yu Meng was dazed for a second and then frowned in surprise. You brought me here with the intention of killing them? Li Yunxin humphed and said, quick revenge. It's all about speed. Plus, I told her that if she touches one of my messengers, I will destroy her entire family within a month. How can I survive in the Jianghu if I don't keep my word? But your injury is beyond serious. Yu Meng shook his head and said, it's only been 2 days. Now you can only use some tricks but it's hard for you to show your true body. You want to destroy the 5 Ghost Sword sect with your emptiness realm cultivation? Huh. Li Yunxin sneered, do you still care about your Kenzo? I'm afraid that if you die they won't be able to help you. Yu Meng lowered his head and thought, I don't know everything. I know a little about Yunshan and Daotong Kenzo. But after I reincarnated and stayed in the mortal world for a long time, some things might have changed. However, in the art of the painting sect, you are the only one who can bring the dead back to life. Li Yunxin's expression suddenly became awkward. He turned around and walked a few steps before coughing softly. Do you really think the art saint is dead? I reincarnated and saw her soul down there. After crossing the bridge of helplessness, I took Granny Meng's sedan chair which was ahead of me. I don't know how many times he's reincarnated now, but he's already a complete mortal. Granny Meng's palanquin? Not soup? Yu Meng thought for a while and said, ordinary people naturally drink the soup. Don't ask me why, but those with high cultivation have to sit in a sedan chair. I don't know the rules of the underworld hall. All right. Li Yunxin pondered for a while and hesitated. He still asked, now, can we find her reincarnation? Yu Meng looked at him thoughtfully. Look for her? Why was he looking for her? Even if you could find it, what use would it be? After reincarnating a few times he had completely forgotten about his past. Do you think she's still the art saint? Well, back then she was famous for her beauty, but you have to know that after reincarnation, she might turn into a man or a woman, or she might turn from beauty to ugliness. After seeing what she looked like in the past, no one would have the heart to see what she looks like after reincarnation. Because no matter what she looks like, she's no longer the same person. Li Yunxin remained silent. After a while he turned around and said, all right, I'll help you. But you do have a way to help me. Since Jin Guangzi is a member of the Freemasonry. Humph. Then there's a way to try. A dangerous smile appeared on his face as he stared at Yu Meng. You said that the elders of the Freemasonry are bad celestials who came to the mortal world and don't have any magical powers. Besides, there used to be a celestial living in your head, so you must know some unimportant details. So, how about you pretend to be an elder of the Freemasonry and go to the 5-Line Sword sect with me? Yu Meng was stunned as if he didn't know what to say. Then he laughed. He thought for a while and said, are you joking? Apart from the celestials who came to the mortal world, we know almost nothing about the elders of the Freemasonry. Now you want me to pretend to be an elder and go there? How confident do you think I am? Can I even have 10%? Li Yunxin, on the other hand, laughed happily. Look, right. Even you think it's a fool's dream. People with a normal brain wouldn't do this. Then Jin Guangzi won't think of it. Yu Meng was stunned for a while and realized that Li Yunxin wasn't joking. This lunatic was really going to do it. He frowned. Of course Jin Guangzi won't think of it. Because it's impossible to succeed. What the elders look like, what state they are in, what the structure of the Freemasonry organization is, what level it is, whether there's any special name, secret code or way of contact. I have no idea. This is no different from asking a secular person who has never seen the world to pretend to be a demon in a demon's nest. It's really. When I do things, I never think about how confident I am. Li Yunxin listened to him for a while, then walked to him and sat down. He reached out and patted his shoulder. There are only two states for one thing: success or failure. It's possible to do it with 10% confidence, but it's also possible to be seen through with 90% confidence. It's better to divide every step into success and failure. If it succeeds, continue according to plan 1. If it doesn't, change to plan 2. I've dealt with those quantum people before. He pressed on Yu Meng's shoulder again and said in a more serious tone, "Those guys, every one of them is arrogant. They think they're the best in the world and are extremely arrogant. For example, that gold photon. Before she killed me, she rambled on and on about a bunch of nonsense. She had to express all the emotions in her heart before she felt that her thoughts were clear. But it's this kind of people. Guess what I found in common?" He raised a finger. "When they were talking nonsense and showing off, they never mentioned the elders of the Freemasonry, not even a hint. You told me that the elders were celestial beings, so I thought about it. Did they say anything like, 'Haha, how can you imagine the origins of the elders?' Or something like that? There are so many quantum people, all of them with their eyes on top of their heads, but none of them mention this. So I suspect that they don't know the true identity of the elders at all. It's more likely that they haven't even seen them." Yu Meng sighed in a low voice. "Just because of this guess of yours?" Li Yunxin stared at his eyes for a while, then suddenly laughed. "Then let's find a quantum person to ask, okay?" It wasn't the same as Yu Meng speaking. He flipped his palm. A misty cloud and a small bright moon immediately appeared in his palm. This was the Misty Lock Toad Palace. In Chengdu, 2 quantum people chased after Kun Wuzi. Yang Jianzi killed one and I took the other. The one I took is called Fu Liangzi, an old acquaintance. Li Yunxin took out a talisman from his sleeve and stuck it on the magic weapon. Previously, he had fought a fierce battle and was exhausted. It would be very hard to activate the magic weapon with monster power directly, so he used talisman. After arranging the magic figures, he points with his fingers. "When I was in Dongting, he was tricked by me. Now he is in my hands again." Then he blew on it gently. In the bright moon, a small person appeared. This little person jumped up and down in the moon halo, seeming to want to go out. But no matter how he walked, he just staggered in the same place, which looked funny. Li Yunxin stared at him for a while and then looked at Yu Meng. "Now my monster power is almost exhausted. It was very strenuous to activate this treasure. If he were to borrow these talismans, he could only give it a try. But the Fu Liangzi in the moon halo is attached to a real person in Daotong. You used to be a sage, so you should understand the risks. Right?" It was still afternoon and the sun was still golden. But hearing Li Yunxin's words, Yu Meng sucked in a cold breath. "I understand." He pursed his lips and kept silent for a while. "If something goes wrong and you lose control of this treasure, it will unfold in the same place. At that time, the entire little rock canyon will probably be wrapped in its illusion. But it's okay, the illusion is not much different from this moment. When my monster power is restored, I can put this treasure away. But if the person inside comes out because the illusion is out of control, you and I can't defeat him now." "Yes." Li Yunxin nodded and looked at him. "Now I will try to open this illusion." He raised his hand. But Yu Meng also raised his hand and grabbed him. "What do you mean?" What do you mean by taking such a risk?" Yu Meng looked at him seriously. "You are doubting me." Li Yunxin slightly lowered his head and smiled. "Taking a risk. In your eyes it's a risk, but in my eyes it's exciting. Now you probably don't know me very well, so sometimes you think I do things very strangely. But if you know me better in the future, you will call me a madman." Yu Meng took a deep breath and breathed it out. "There's no need to wait for the future. Now, and what you said about sneaking into the Wuyu Sword sect. Just these 2 things, I already know you are a madman. But a madman also has a reason to be a madman. Why are you going crazy now?" Li Yunxin put down his hand. He looked at Yu Meng. "Do I have any reason not to doubt you? You brought me into the city of Wei. Later, you said Old Shen asked you to do that. I was chased and escaped to Changji town and found you there. You said Old Shen told your master Lu Gongjiao to go there when you had nowhere else to go. I was ambushed and besieged by Jin Guangzi. Until I used up all my means and was about to die. Then you took action and said you had just recovered your memory. Furthermore, the magic treasure used by the golden photons just so happens to be the one that you can take. Now your master Lu Gongjiao is long dead. The old Xin you said is also gone. Everything is just what you said. You used many coincidences to explain the problem to me. So tell me, why don't I doubt you? Yu Meng opened his mouth. He seemed to have a lot of things to say, but he didn't know where to start. Finally he smiled. That's the truth. It's really a coincidence. I never believe in coincidences. Li Yunxin sighed. Even if I took the risk to believe you, I would also think of another possibility, whether you were used as a chess piece by someone else without knowing it. Chess piece. Yu Meng finally sneered. This was the first time he sneered at Li Yunxin. Although he was the son of a rich family in the secular world, he didn't have any annoying habits. Even now his character was still gentle and patient. But now he suddenly sneered, and there was a bit of sword and halberd aura in his expression, as if he had become the sword saint who dominated the world in an instant. Who can use me as a chess piece? Maybe I didn't know it during the past 10 years. But now that I have recovered my memory, I carefully thought about the past 10 years again. What you have recovered is only your memory, my friend. Li Yunxin interrupted him, slightly lowered his head and looked at him seriously. Only your memory. And those memories of your past, no matter how wise and calm you were in the memory, you have to know one fact. At that time you had cultivation and you had supernatural powers. Most importantly, you cultivated to the level of supreme indifference. This means that for a long time, you were cold and heartless enough. This kind of person can indeed deal with problems very rationally and do a lot of beautiful things. But now, you are just a secular person with those memories. He paused. You will make mistakes. You are not the only one in the world who has the experience of having the past. I know how you feel. Don't mistake memories for reality. Yu Meng frowned slightly and blinked. Li Yunxin slowed down his speech and at the same time raised his hand to point into the distance. For example, Wuxia and Lily. These two little girls are very good to you and you are also very good to them. Because of them, you told me many things and you even planned to find a place to live in seclusion. What do the decisions you've made have to do with your past memories? Yu Meng said again. So please think about it carefully, Li Yunxin said. Is it possible that the art saint is not dead? After saying this, he stood up and walked to the opposite side of Yu Meng. Then he covered the moon with one hand. Then I will think about whether I should try to open this thing now or open it a day later. Yu Meng was silent for a while and also raised his head to look at Li Yunxin. So this is what you have been thinking all along. You didn't completely believe what I said. Completely believing this kind of thing is very extravagant, Li Yunxin said without batting an eyelid. Yu Meng thought again and lightly sighed. Then, in Changji town, you were exhausted at your wits' end and you were almost killed by the golden photon. In this matter, in reality, you were not really at the end of your road, right? You had one last trick, but because of me you did not use it, right? Li Yunxin grinned, revealing his snow-white fine teeth. Then he used his finger to brush the talisman on the magic weapon. Guess. Chapter 353. But Yu Meng shook his head. There's nothing to guess. I haven't had much contact with you. But now that I think about what you did in the city of Wei, even though I don't know the details of your plan, I can imagine that it must be a meticulous plan. People like you are too smart. It's normal that you don't trust others. But you should know that not everyone in this world is as smart as you. Maybe some fools just want to live a peaceful and happy life and don't want to think too much. Oh. Li Yunxin smiled. You want to say that you are that kind of fool. Yu Meng shook his head and looked to the side as if he felt helpless towards Li Yunxin. After a while he looked at him. You have seen some of the things that the art saint left in this world, right? She left some demons or something else. In Changji town, you told me that you couldn't save Wuxia and Lily for the time being because you wanted to reach the level of the art saint, right? You really know more. Li Yunxin said. Yes. He had seen the evil king and the 7 sons at the Pitfall Mountain. Different from the things that he created when he reached the transcendent state and the true state, The demons that the art saint created actually had divine sense, as if they really existed in this world. But the things that he created, whether it was the green armored general, the archer, or the walker, were just ordinary bodies. They had almost no divine sense. The combat power that they could exert in this world was only slightly above average. Therefore he really wanted to know what the art saint had done to achieve such a level. I planned to tell you after you recovered your demon power. But I will tell you now. Yu Meng adjusted his cloak. The reason is very simple. You have to let him really exist in this world. Once you have this foundation, you can mold him according to your thoughts. After saying this, he stopped talking and turned his head to look at the scenery at the foot of the mountain. It seemed that he was sulking because of Li Yunxin's words and speculations. Then Li Yunxin also stopped talking. He frowned and thought for a while, then sighed. So, it's such a simple reason. It was indeed a very simple principle. He already knew that there were Yin gods in this world. For example, many people in a certain place believed that there was a mountain god on a mountain. Then, if it was by chance and there were enough believers, then the mountain god might really be manifested. There were 3 types of Yin spirits, and this was one of them. Yu Meng's words, in addition to his own understanding of painting, should be saying, for example, to first create such a mountain god. This thing took shape and became a part of this world. Then with this thing as the foundation, he drew what he wanted. Naturally, there were many technical details that needed to be recognized, practiced, and researched. But as long as there was such a general direction, then everything would not be difficult. The reason why Li Yunxin was certain that this method was correct was because of Mrs. Sanhua. He drew Dragon Lady Shavana's body for her. The Dragon Lady, Shavana, had been painted and enshrined in the Dragon King Temple in the city of Wei. Many villagers worshipped her. The power of faith and prayers of those people were naturally not enough to create a Yin spirit out of thin air. But according to Yu Meng's words, it could be considered as having some foundation in this world. Therefore he made that body for Sanhua. Although it could not transform into a real dragon, it had the ability to use flames. This kind of supernatural ability was not something that could be achieved with pure physical strength. Li Yunxin had been thinking about this matter. But the reason was so simple. Yu Meng smiled. The reason for many things is very simple. I only said one sentence and you understood it. It shows that you are a rare smart person. Then you should also know that there is a simple reason for it. People are the same as this kind of thing. Not everyone is like what you think. Maybe. Li Yunxin sighed softly. Everyone wants to live a simple life. Before you brought me to the city of Wei, I also wanted to live a simple life. Even before that, when my parents were still alive, what I thought was just to cultivate in seclusion and understand the way of immortals. But no. People in Jianghu have no choice. He murmured this sentence, then turned around and looked at the foot of the mountain outside the pavilion. At the foot of the mountain was the bustling market of the city of Little Rock, with people coming and going. He had good eyesight. Even if he was a little melancholy and absent-minded, but the scene of the bustling secular people living in an ordinary autumn afternoon was still vivid in his mind. He repeated the sentence, people in Jianghu have no choice, in his heart again and chuckled. This sentence was only said before. But now I have experienced it. In fact, there is another saying, it's hard to explain. In the past I didn't know what it felt like to be hard to explain. But gradually I know. You told me not to think of people as so complicated. It's hard to explain. At this point he suddenly stopped talking. As he saw a person, no, 3 people. The thinking pavilion at the top of the Little Rock Mountain was facing the market in the city. It was a huge market. Apart from the business district at the top of the mountain, most of the inns, restaurants, libraries, and all kinds of stalls and hawkers were gathered there. It was 3 streets long and wide, and its scale was 3 or 4 times the size of Changji town. Usually it was almost crowded, and today there was still a lot of people coming and going. With so many people, it was not easy to notice anyone. But as he was talking and looking, he happened to see a commotion. At the center of the commotion were 3 girls. One was dressed in red and the other was dressed in white. There was also a young maid with her hair tied into 2 buns. The girl in white was riding a shiny white donkey with one leg to one side. The reins of the donkey were held in the hands of the maid. When Li Yunxin noticed them, they stopped in front of a soup cake shop. They seemed to be attracted by the aroma and stopped to take a look. But this shop was actually nothing more than a trolley. It stopped on the side of the street and put down a table and a bench. Then it lit the charcoal fire in the iron cylinder, took out all kinds of spoons and opened the shop. 3 girls and a little donkey took up a lot of space. The girl on the donkey refused to get down, so the donkey blocked the whole cart. But the 3 girls didn't leave after buying. Instead they began chattering away. The most talkative one was the maid with her hair tied into 2 buns. She stared at the dozen or so spoons on the chopping board of the cart, slowly sniffing them one by one. After sniffing, she asked the stall owner, "What is this?" Then she turned around and told her young miss. At first the stall owner saw that the 3 girls were very beautiful, like fairies descending from heaven, so he was very attentive. Not only did he tell them the names of the spoons, but he also told them how they were made. From their clothes he knew they were young misses from rich families. Maybe if he made them happy he would give them a tael of silver. But when he said that, the maid became more interested. As if there was no one else around, she began to chat with her young miss about the local conditions and customs along the way, such as what tasted good in which city, and what interesting things they saw in a certain place. Her young miss also pursed her lips and smiled faintly, replying casually. In this way the 3 girls blocked the customers. But soup cakes weren't something rare. Since this place was blocked, there were naturally other places. So people slowly walked past them, occasionally taking a few greedy glances at their beauty, which was also a pleasure. The stall owner wasn't in a hurry. Because they spoke softly, they should really be well-educated young misses. In Little Rock Canyon he had seen a lot of gifted scholars and beautiful women, so he knew that among these young misses and young masters, there were many who were kind and good-natured, and few who were arrogant and domineering. As the saying goes, a servant knows etiquette. With such young misses standing in front of him, they blocked a lot of business and they seemed to be in a good mood, so they probably gave him a lot of money. It wasn't the first time he encountered this kind of thing, so he actually felt a bit happier. Entertaining these 3 was better than being busy for more than half an hour. In this way the 2 girls chatted and laughed for nearly half an hour. The girl in red next to them didn't say anything, but her pair of beautiful big eyes looked around, as if she couldn't get enough of the novelty of this market. Girls loved to chat, so the stall owner gradually became a bit impatient. Because he had asked for more than 10 kinds of spoons, but he had never ordered a bowl of soup cakes to try. The stall owner was a middle-aged man with a family, so he thought he should ask. If he could order any of the dishes, then he could ask for some money. So while the 2 girls were smiling, he asked with a smile, "Miss, do you want to try some soup cakes?" But the young miss in white on the donkey only glanced at him, then turned around and talked to the maid about that dumb scholar in Luzhou City. The stall owner thought that the young miss didn't hear what he said clearly. So he waited for a while, until they giggled again, then he dared to raise his voice and said, "Miss, my soup cakes not only satisfy hunger but also quench thirst. It's a rare taste." But unexpectedly the maid with 2 buns of hair, who looked obedient and smart, suddenly changed her expression. The smile on her face disappeared in an instant and she turned around to stare at him. "Noisy. If you make any more noise I'll eat you." How could the stall owner expect the little girl to change her expression so quickly? He was stunned for a moment. But then he heard the young miss in white on the donkey smile slightly, raised her hand and pretended to hit her. "You're just a shell, why are you so scary? If you scare people, how can the taste be good?" Then she looked at the stall owner. "Since you're so anxious, I'll just eat a little." The maid stuck out her tongue and giggled. When the stall owner heard this, he was slightly relieved. He was most afraid that his master was as unreasonable as the maid, then he would have wasted half an hour. So he hurriedly smiled, it's okay. But halfway through his words he was dumbfounded. Because he saw the young miss in white reach into her left sleeve. He thought she was going to give him money. However, when she really took out the item, it was actually a bloody heart. The stall owner was so shocked that he almost fell to the ground. He even forgot to think about how the bloody thing in the sleeve of the white dress didn't get wet. The next moment the young miss raised her hand and there was a cracking sound. Such a bloody, hot and steaming thing was thrown on the chopping board of the stall. Then she smiled warmly at the stall owner. "Cut this and heat it up. Don't be too old and don't be too raw. Just fresh and tender." Then she raised her hand and pointed at the dozen spoons on the cart. "Add this, and this and dip it in the sauce and soup." The stall owner was dumbfounded and speechless. The people near the stall also stopped and looked at the scene in astonishment, and then whispered to each other. Seeing his dumbfounded expression, the servant girl giggled again. It was as if she had seen something very funny. He also reached into his sleeves and searched for a while. Unexpectedly, he found a big shiny gold ingot. She casually threw the big ingot on the chopping board, and with a dong sound she said, "My young miss is hungry. Why are you still standing there?" This big ingot immediately pulled the stall owner back to his senses. His eyes became even rounder and he grabbed the ingot, looked at it again and again and tried to put it into his mouth and bite it. But he had lived for dozens of years and had never seen what gold looked like. Even if he bit it, he couldn't tell whether it was real or fake. But seeing a group of people on the street stretching their necks to stare at the ingot in his hand in disbelief, he hurriedly put it into his pocket. Then, trembling with fear, he forced himself to pull himself together. Yes, I'll give it a try. He had been making soup pancakes for more than 10 years and had never really taken care of meat. Usually he could only cut a few tails of meat on New Year's Day for a sumptuous meal. How would he know any exquisite cooking methods? But fortunately, the young miss in white only said, "Heat it up." So he first tried to wash the heart and liver and then carefully cut it with a knife. But perhaps because this thing was bloody and scary, he felt his heart palpitate as he cut it, and secretly looked at the three girls with his eyes. The more he looked, the more flustered he felt. When he boiled water under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he scalded the heart and liver pieces until they broke and then put them in a big pot. Then he used a big rough porcelain bowl to mix the sauce and soup according to the young miss's instructions. But at this time, when he smelled the heart and liver pieces, he still felt a fishy smell. So for some reason he first used his finger to pick up a piece, dipped it in the sauce and put it into his mouth, wanting to taste it. But he couldn't taste anything. He only felt that he had chewed something in his mouth, and felt satisfied after the food went down. But when he asked about the fishy smell, the taste faded out of his mouth as if he was chewing wax. He looked up and saw the young maid frowning as if she wanted to hurry him, but he was more worried that the gold ingot in his arms would be taken back. He hurriedly smiled. "I don't know why, it doesn't taste good." However, the young lady suddenly covered her mouth and giggled. Her eyes were sparkling as she said, "You idiot! How can there be any taste when you eat your own heart and liver?" Hearing her words, the stall owner was stunned. After a long time, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. He looked down again. Like a ball breaking, there was a pew sound. His clothes were neatly torn in the middle. Not only were his clothes torn apart, but his stomach and chest were also neatly split open. He opened his mouth and felt his whole body suddenly lose strength. He subconsciously reached into his stomach and chest. He wanted to check if his heart and liver were still there. But he only felt that his body was as empty as his consciousness. With a bang, he fell on his back, and a stone that looked like an ingot in his clothes rolled far away with blood. The dead silence only lasted for a breath's time. The next moment, all the people on the street let out terrifying screams, like a group of frightened chickens, ducks, pigs and dogs, running in all directions, trampling on each other and flipping the wicker baskets of the stalls on the street. They all ran for their lives with their hands over their heads. And this sound seemed to make the young miss in white feel that it was too noisy. She suddenly frowned and took a slight breath. And then, suddenly, there was a crane cry that was so sharp that it was like a sharp knife scratching the eardrums, and it went straight to the sky. But after this sound, all the other sounds stopped. The people on the 3 long streets, the people in the whole market, all bled from their 7 orifices, fell down and died in an instant. Then she lightly jumped off the little black donkey, walked 2 steps, kicked away the stall owner whose stomach had been cut open, and leaned on his little cart. Using her slender white fingers to play with the scalded heart and liver, she ate it in a gentle manner. After a quarter of an hour, the sound of chaotic footsteps could be heard. 5 swordsmen holding long swords appeared at the end of the street. They first looked at the corpse-strewn street and then looked at each other. Gritting their teeth, they slowed down their steps and slowly approached. Then the first swordsman shouted sternly, "The 5-sword sect has stationed cultivators in Little Rock City. Where did you demons come from, and how dare you commit murder here?" But the woman in white and her servant girl did not pay attention to them, and only focused on enjoying the food. Instead, the woman in red, who had been silent all this time, opened her mouth. She frowned slightly and in a sweet voice she shouted back, 5-sword sect? I'm looking for stinky Taoist priests like you who don't know life from death. Where is your sect leader? Get out here for me. The swordsman laughed coldly. Hee hee. And you're actually demons who have come to our door? You're the one who doesn't know life from death. Our sect leader just killed a big demon in the Qin kingdom a few days ago, and now you little demons have come to our door. Hearing this, the woman in red was slightly stunned and looked at the woman in white. Then the woman in white stood up straight, suddenly raised her hand and pointed 4 times at the 5 swordsmen. After these 4 points, except for the swordsman who had spoken, the heads of the 4 people behind him suddenly flew up into the sky. With a few splashes, a large amount of blood sprayed out, covering the swordsman's entire body. The swordsman was immediately stunned. When he came to his senses, he wanted to run away. Among the 5 people, his cultivation was the highest and he was already in the transcendent realm. But that demon was right in front of him, and with a raise of her hand she killed 4 people. She was a terrible big demon. But how could such a terrible big demon appear in Little Rock City, the gate of the 5-sword sect? In one breath he ran 4 steps and then made a sword sign, and was about to fly away on the sword light to escape. But the 3 terrible demons behind him did not catch up. He could only hear the female monster in red shouting from afar. Let your sect leader know. The princess of Dongting is here. Tell her to hand over my husband. If even a hair is missing, I'll kill your whole sect. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.